The Accidental Entrepreneur is produced by Beinhacker Law and brought to you through our affiliate relationships with the following sponsors. One of One Productions, the New Jersey-based podcast studio that produces and edits both audio and video podcasts. They sell equipment for the average podcaster and have even created a guesting kit exclusively for our listeners. North Authentic, the conscious hair care marketplace offering the cleanest brands from around the world. The Healthy Place, the e-commerce site with thousands of supplements to help you live a healthier life, along with natural solutions for chronic pain, stress, anxiety, depression, sleeplessness, and much, much more. And be sure to support the podcast by ordering some logo merchandise from our online store. Listen to all of our sponsors' commercials later in this episode and follow their links in the show notes to learn more about their products and services.
In my own mind, I guess I created a new category of investing.
Didn't even realize it at the time.
But when I finally left McKinsey, I had, again, no money. I didn't even have business cards. I certainly didn't have an office. I didn't have any clients, and I didn't have any investors looking for deals.
Right, so this is not how you'd recommend most people start out their entrepreneurial career with no job, no money, no wherewithal, nothing in writing, just wing it, right? Which is not what this podcast is about.
And back then, I was totally clueless about the importance of networking.
Right.
Because I had never done it. I never had to do it. I was never responsible.
It wasn't as common a term as it is today.
No, back then, nobody talked about it. There weren't networking groups. There weren't networking books.
Right.
I had virtually no successful experience developing new relationships.
You know, it's funny because, as I told you, the name of this podcast is called The Accidental Entrepreneur. You became an entrepreneur by accident. You might have been the first accidental entrepreneur.
Right. That's how I got all these gray hairs.
The information provided in these episodes is for entertainment purposes only. It is not a guarantee of success or to be construed as advice of any kind. You should always seek advice from local licensed professionals before making any decisions.
The dictionary defines an entrepreneur as a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. People often start a business without much choice, perhaps due to a job loss or just being dissatisfied at work, and they come up with an idea they just know can be successful. They become entrepreneurs by accident. That is to say, their success or failure happens by accident, not with intention. My name is Mitch Beinhacker. I'm a corporate attorney and a business advisor. You're listening to The Accidental Entrepreneur, my podcast about how to achieve success on purpose, not by accident. Join me along with our monthly guests where we share our knowledge and help you get a hold of your business. And now on to today's episode. This episode is a re-release of the first two episodes that I ever recorded in February of 2019 with my good friend Jack Killion. Jack unfortunately left us and died on November 5th, 2021, and he's been sadly missed. And I think it's important to continue to share his story, to share his knowledge, and to share his ideas. Jack was not only a friend, but he was a mentor, he was an advisor, and I hope that you continue to find his knowledge and his guidance to be helpful as you continue your journey in entrepreneurship and in business. We miss you, Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack Killion, and I define and position myself as an entrepreneur, a growth strategist, an educator, and an author. And that means I basically devote myself to developing organizations and developing people.
On this episode, Jack Killion from NetworkAllTheTime.com joins me to share his story, his experiences, and advice for anyone looking to network and grow their business. Jack is an Ivy League graduate who started consulting with and helping entrepreneurs and startups back in the 1960s, when a lot of these terms, networking, startups, entrepreneurs, didn't even exist, or at least were not well known by the general public. Well, Jack, welcome to The Accidental Entrepreneur. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm thrilled to be here, Mitch. This is an opportunity to share some of my thinking and insights with your audience.
I appreciate it, and I'm sure our audience will appreciate it as well. So I want to get into what you're doing, now with your book writing and your coaching and all that stuff. But before we do that, let's take a step back so people can learn about your background, your history. So where were you born and raised?
I was born in Newark. Both parents are blue collar people. Early in my life, I moved to Caldwell, New Jersey, and I watched my dad try to develop his own business as a tool and die maker. So I grew up with entrepreneurship in my DNA.
Okay, that's interesting because I wasn't born, but I moved to West Caldwell, New Jersey in 1971, which probably was a little past your time.
Small world, though.
Were you, as a child or as a teenager, were you into business then? Did you have businesses? Were you a bit of an entrepreneur or not really?
Not really, but I was always involved with my father in his efforts to bootstrap his little tool and die company.
So that's what he did. He had a tool and die company?
Tool and die company.
Okay, so for those people out there listening, what is a tool and die company?
It's a company that made basically made parts for larger organizations, contracted manufacturing company, which eventually evolved into a business developing and manufacturing plastic extruding equipment. And the company became Killion Extruders.
So they made the equipment.
Made the
plastic parts.
Right.
And you had a relatively uneventful childhood? I mean,
relatively
no hardships, nothing like that?
No, not really.
Okay, and then, so then you went off to college, right?
Went to public high school in Caldwell.
Okay.
And
James Caldwell High School?
James Caldwell High School.
I graduated in 1985.
There you go. Different classes.
Right.
I was fortunate enough to be able to get into Yale. So I went to undergrad to study mechanical engineering. And back then, Yale was in the dark ages. No women students. Most of the students were from high-end private boys' schools.
Right, the boarding schools, right?
Yeah, so I came out of a public high school, and the first week I was at Yale, they suggested I transfer because they didn't think I had the background coming from a public high school.
You didn't come from Choate or Andover, one of those schools, right?
Right. So I really had to bust my chops over the next 4 years. But I survived. I wound up near the top of my class in mechanical engineering.
So that would be a Bachelor of Science you would get,
Bachelor
right?
of Science in mechanical engineering.
Okay, and then where'd you go on from there?
I went immediately on to MIT, to the Sloan School.
Okay.
Sloan Business School, where I got my master's.
Right, one of the top in the country.
My MBA. I had taken so many extra courses at Yale that I actually graduated from MIT in a semester less than normal. And while I was at MIT, I was recruited by a British firm, British tech company. They were looking for one American MBA student to go to London to help them set up a management consulting team in London to work with their divisions in Europe. And I was lucky enough to get the offer. Okay. So the day I graduated from MIT, I jumped on an airplane. And I was working in London the next day for a British company.
And that was really only 3.5 years in, right? Because you graduated in December.
Right.
Okay. Right. So what was it? Do you remember the name of that company?
Sure. Elliott Automation. It was a public tech company.
Okay.
Very diversified portfolio of companies. And I worked out of their London office for about the first year I was with them. We developed a consulting practice. And one of the divisions I was working with as a client division was manufacturing computers and running computer service centers in Europe.
Okay.
And
this was a client of the company.
This was one of their divisions.
Oh, one of their divisions.
One of their divisions. And at the time, this was just when computers were getting going.
Right.
So Elliott was the second largest computer manufacturer in Europe, only behind IBM.
And you never heard of them here?
Never heard of them. Well, back then you might have heard of them here.
Maybe, right.
So after spending some time consulting with this one division, it was clear they didn't have the right leadership. To make a long story short, the head of Elliott Automation asked me if I would take on the role of trying to run and straighten out the division.
And you were how old at that point?
Early 20s.
You were young.
I recommended against it. I said, you're going to have a revolt in the organization. I said, plus, I'm a kid.
Right.
I'm a kid American in the organization of senior British.
And you had been there how long at that point?
A year and a half.
Okay, so not very long.
They came back to me a couple of days later and they said, no, we reconsider. We'd really like you to do this.
Okay.
So I took on the role of being the managing director of this division that was manufacturing computers and running service centers in Europe.
So you were like 23 years old or something
23,
like that, right?
24 years old.
Okay.
In the meantime, I'd come back to the States for a long weekend, got married, took my wife back over there. She had never been out of the country.
I assume you knew her before that. You just meet her in a weekend.
No. We went together through high school. So I was able to get Judy a job as assistant to the head of the British Computer Society. And we were having a grand old time. And I had actually made real progress in turning the business around when I got drafted into the Army. So
even though you were working there, you're still eligible for the draft.
Yep.
You're an American citizen.
And they just got me a few weeks before I was 26 years old.
You would have avoided it.
I would have avoided it. So I had no choice. I had to come back to the States.
What year was that?
It was in the early 60s, mid-60s.
So this was what, Vietnam?
Yeah, Vietnam.
Okay.
So I came back to the States the day I arrived back in New Jersey. I was shipped right down to Fort Dix, and I spent the next 2 years as a private in the Army. They assigned me to the Frankfurt Arsenal down in Philadelphia, where they positioned me as assistant to the head of the Army's metrology and calibration mission, which is the equivalent of the National Bureau of Standards for the Army.
Right, but you didn't have to go see combat because you came out of MIT, you had an engineering degree, they needed your intellect, they're not sending you out in the front line.
Right.
That was good.
When they asked me what kind of role I want to play in the Army, they give you options. I said I want to be a military police, but that turned out not to be the case.
So then you spent 2 years in the Army, right?
2 years in the Army, except in the Army you get 30 days of leave time.
Okay.
So I decided not
30 days, what, a year?
A year.
Okay.
So I decided not to take any leave time so I could accumulate 60 days at the end of my
So then you only had to do 22 months.
22 months. So I started looking for a job about 6 months before I was due to get out.
Right, so Elliot wasn't holding your position to come back. You got drafted.
No, I could have. I'm sure I could have gone back. But once I was gone for 2 years and back in the States and entrenched here, I wasn't going to go back. I think it's often tough to go back in your career.
Right.
So I started looking for a job maybe 6 months before I got out of the Army. And I managed to wind up with an offer from McKinsey, which I think is one of the top management consulting firms in the world.
Still today.
Right. And so I figured out a plan where I could essentially leave the Army prior to being discharged. I would work Monday through Friday with McKinsey, get back to Frankfurt Arsenal by midnight on Friday night, and be in the military Saturday and Sunday and leave again Monday morning. So I actually was able to work a longer duration than the 60 days.
Oh, I see. So you were able to just do weekends at the base.
Right.
And then
Monday through Friday with McKinsey.
For McKinsey. Okay, and this was in the 60s.
This was in the 60s. And back then, McKinsey was, again, primarily men, like Yale was.
Right.
And it was almost 95% Harvard B School graduates.
Right. Oh, yeah, that was a big feeder.
Right.
McKinsey was Harvard.
So when they recruited me, or when I found the opportunity, they really let me know that I was going to be a trial balloon for them because...
a trial balloon. So you graduate with a BS from Yale, you come out of the Sloan School at MIT, and you're a trial
I'm a trial balloon.
Pretty funny.
To see if I'm going to be able to make it and compete
with these guys.
Keep up with all these smart Harvard B School guys.
Yeah, they probably still feel the same way at Harvard.
So I spent about a little over 4 years with McKinsey, worked on a number of really interesting projects in diverse industries like the railroad industry, the shipping industry. I helped develop a marketing strategy for the Port of Philadelphia. I did work in the entertainment industry. Columbia Records was a client.
So you got exposed to a lot of different businesses because they're consulting with all kinds of businesses.
Yeah, since I had this semi-inferior complex, because Yale had wanted to throw me out, and McKinsey wasn't sure whether I just made a point about working everybody. That started to pay off, so I wound up working on multiple major projects at the same time, being the head person. And after almost 5 years, McKinsey started talking to me about becoming an early stage partner at the firm. I still wasn't confident enough that I could really do that, or that was warranted.
And if my math is right, so you're like late 20s?
Late 20s.
Close to 30? Okay.
Late 20s.
And you would work like on were you working on multiple companies at the same time, or you go from one project and then that would finish and you go to something?
I was typically, by that stage, I was typically managing multiple projects at the same time.
Oh, okay.
2 or 3 projects at the same time. And within each project, there would be teams of people. So I helped put together the merger of the Burlington Great Northern Railway. And I had 7 or 8 different teams looking at different aspects of the merger.
And you were supervising the whole thing?
So I was running the teams, plus I was running other clients. So the day they started talking to me about nominating me as the early stage partner at the end of the year, I realized that probably wasn't what I wanted to do for my career.
Okay.
So late at night, I was working late at night, and I called my wife up. I told her I was still working. I was going to be really late. And I said, I just made 2 decisions. And she said, what are they? I said, we're going to buy a racehorse. And she said, why are we going to do that? And I said, because I'm really interested in the racing industry.
Now, you had never been involved with horses any part of your life?
Just going to the track.
Caldwell's not a big horse town.
Just going to the track.
Okay.
With my dad when I was a kid.
This is just a whim. You wanted to get into horse.
It was a passion. I was really interested. I thought it was really a very exciting sport that I just gravitated towards. So,
and where were you at this point? You were in New Jersey?
We were living in New Jersey, renting a house.
Where was McKinsey's office?
In New York City, in Park Avenue.
New York City. Okay.
But I was traveling throughout the country with McKinsey.
They had you on the road a lot.
I'd leave Sunday night and get back Friday night. And it was a killer schedule.
Yeah.
She said, when are we going to buy a horse? I said, oh, we don't have much money. So
well, that ever stop you, right?
No. So I said, we'll have to find a cheap horse. And she said, what's the other decision she made? Because I said I'd made 2 decisions. I said, I'm going to quit my job. And she said, when are you going to do that? I said, tomorrow.
That's perfect. So you want to go buy a racehorse, you have no money, and you're going to quit your job.
Right. And she said, why? I said, because they're starting to talk to me about becoming a partner here, and I'm not sure that's really what I want to do. And I don't think I should let them go down that path and encourage them to think that's what I want to do.
That's fair.
So I think I should give them my notice, wrap up the projects I'm on, and find something that I want to do. I think it's time for me to see if I can make it on my own.
Okay.
Judy supported both of those decisions. It took me maybe 3 or 4 months to leave McKinsey, and they kept upping the ante, upping the salary and all that.
They wanted
to keep me. And what they offered that came closest to keeping me is they had been retained in England to overhaul the British postal system. And they offered me the opportunity to go back to London and head up that project, which would have been kind of cool, would have gotten me back into England.
Right.
And I think overhauling a country's postal system would have been a fantastic experience.
I'm sure it would have been interesting, especially in those days.
So that was really hard to turn down, but I eventually left.
Okay.
And I left with a vision of this was going to be the start of my entrepreneurial career. And I was going to start out trying to raise money for early stage or startup companies.
Which was kind of unique in the 60s. Nowadays, it's a common discussion.
Yeah. Back then, there was no mention of venture capital funds.
Angel investors. The term didn't exist.
In my own mind, I guess I created a new category of investing.
Didn't even realize it at the time.
But when I finally left McKinsey, I had, again, no money. I didn't even have business cards. I certainly didn't have an office. I didn't have any clients, and I didn't have any investors looking for deals.
Right, so this is not how you'd recommend most people start out their entrepreneurial career with no job, no money, no wherewithal, nothing in writing, just wing it, right? Which is not what this podcast is about.
And back then, I was totally clueless about the importance of networking.
Right.
Because I had never done it. I never had to do it. I was never responsible.
It wasn't as common a term as it is today.
No, back then, nobody talked about it. There weren't networking groups. There weren't networking books.
Right.
I had virtually no successful experience developing new relationships.
You know, it's funny because, as I told you, the name of this podcast is called The Accidental Entrepreneur. You became an entrepreneur by accident. You might have been the first accidental entrepreneur.
Right. That's how I got all these gray hairs. I just started out. At the time, we were living in New Jersey.
And you didn't even know at that point what you were going to do, right?
I basically had this concept I was going to help raise money for early-stage startup companies.
But did you have any?
No, I had none. I had no companies to raise money for, and I had no investors looking to invest in deals. So I would leave my home every morning because I felt like I had to act like I was going to work.
Hey.
I would take a bus into New York City. I'd go into Grand Central Station with a pocket full of quarters.
You had no office.
No office.
Okay.
And nobody helping me. No secretary, no partners.
And you had nobody on either side of the issue. You had no startup companies. You had nobody to put money into business.
Right.
Perfect way to start.
Almost by accident, I started trying to reach out to big-time investors. My theory was if I could meet with investors and interview them and understand what kind of investment opportunities they were looking for, if I ever ran across a situation that fit their criteria, I could go back to them legitimately and they would take my call.
Did you have any contacts with these people?
I had no contacts.
Okay.
So I would get on the payphone in Grand Central Station and cold call banks, insurance companies, large institutional investors.
Which is probably a little bit easier then because everybody's so insulated now through email and phones, right?
Right, but still, I had to talk my way.
Secretaries, right?
Yeah, I had to talk my way past the gatekeeper.
Right.
I remember the first person who really treated me with respect and open arms was a guy by the name of Ely Allen, who was running the money in America for the Rothschild family.
Oh, sure.
One of the biggest personal family wealth groups in the world. And Ely said, of course I'll meet with you. Come on down. So I went down to meet with Ely Allen. And I told him my vision was to launch a business raising money for early stage companies. And I'd like to know what their investment criteria was. So if I ever run across something and I called him, he would know I had done my homework.
All right. So let me back up for a second, okay? Because this is kind of the beginnings of you learning about networking and entrepreneurship and all the stuff you do today. But here you are. You're basically a kid, right? You're about 30 years old.
Right.
You have no connections.
Right.
You're calling on a payphone. We didn't have cell phones in those days with quarters to this guy.
Right.
What did you say to him when you got him on the phone for the first time? You don't know me, but...
Yeah, I said, hi, my name is Jack Killion. Do you have a couple minutes I can describe something where I think there's synergies between us? And he would say, some of the people would say yes.
Okay.
And I say, just starting out with a new business. I'm brand new. This is a startup myself. I said, but I'm going to be concentrating on trying to find quality young companies that need money, and I'm going to position myself to help them raise the money that they need. So I'm trying to talk to investors like you and understand your investment criteria. So if I do run across opportunities and I come back to you, you'll know who I am. You'll know that I understand what you're looking for and that I think I have something that would fit your objectives.
And you're already telling them you don't have any opportunities for them now.
Right.
Now, do you remember, I know this was a while ago, but do you remember how many people you had to call on before you actually got somebody on the phone to say, okay, I'll meet with you?
10, 20.
It wasn't that many.
It wasn't many.
Different time.
If you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, you really need to be motivated.
Confident.
And confidence is important, but you need to have a sense of urgency because you're going to run out of cash. You're going to run out of resources.
Right.
So if you're going to start your own business, you got to really hustle and you got to be motivated, and you can't really take no. The second really big time person I met was Jack Dreyfus, who started the Dreyfus Mutual Funds.
Yeah.
And to this day, he had the best office I've ever been in. It was spotless. It was big. It was impressive. But he was willing to give me time talking about the kind of investment opportunities he was looking at. So
what was he doing in those days?
He was running the Dreyfus Funds very successfully with the lion coming out of the subway.
I remember the whole thing.
For the first month or 6 weeks, I concentrated on trying to learn what investors were looking for. And then a thing happened, a very good thing happened that I hadn't anticipated.
Okay. Which is often the way it kind of comes together, but a lot of it has to do with, luck happens because opportunities are created themselves and you see them. So
and you have to be out there. You have to be out there doing it.
Right.
If you're trying to start a business and you're sitting at home working on your plan, it's not going to happen.
I always say, if you want to get hit, you got to play in traffic, right?
Right.
And people sit around waiting for the phone to ring and nothing happens. Right?
Nothing. The lightning is not going to strike. God's not going to strike you with a lightning bolt.
Right.
So I think if you're starting a business, you need to be out of your house, out of your office, 9 to 5, and do the other work from 5 to midnight.
Right.
And I don't see any alternative to that. But the unexpected thing that started to happen is these sources of investment capital started sending me deals that they had rejected.
So they found deals that were maybe too small for them or not within their wheelhouse.
Right.
And they started saying, hey, Jack, I got this deal. He needs money, but we're not putting the money in.
Right. Because I had already established credibility with them. They understood what I was trying to do. And I guess it made them feel better to not reject somebody that had approached them, but to say, why don't you go see my friend Jack? He might be able to help you. So pretty quickly, I started developing a real robust deal flow of early stage companies that were looking for capital.
So now you're getting the customers.
Now I'm getting the customers.
You just got to find the capital because the guy sending them to you wasn't within their appetite.
Right. But what might not be right for the Rothschilds could be right for Jack Dreyfus.
Right.
by developing a network of investors and understanding their requirements, I had alternative places to go once I found a deal. So one of the interesting things about the deal flow is in the beginning how long it took me to really assess an early stage company. And the first one I really looked at, I remember to this.
In terms of evaluating it, the due diligence, is it viable, understanding it?
Right. Yeah. Is it the right management? Do they have a viable business plan? Is there a need? Is there a customer base? Are they realistic? How much money do they need?
Right. You can't just take their word for it. Yeah. Everything they're going to tell you is going to sound great.
Right. Yeah. So the very first deal I looked at was called Low-Cal Kitchens, which probably would work today. But it was a guy who wanted to start a chain of low-calorie restaurants.
Okay.
And I knew nothing about the restaurant industry. Didn't have any real appreciation of counting calories. He didn't have a really good business model. So by the time I got done really looking at it and trying to put together a realistic financial plan and trying to think through whether there was a market for his concept, I probably spent 6 months.
Yeah.
A substantial part of my time. Now when a deal comes to me, because for some reason I'm still in a deal flow channel, I have a pretty good feel of whether I want to look at something or whether it's viable.
Well, you've looked at thousands of businesses.
I've looked at thousands of deals. Sure. And I've started 9 different companies of my own in diverse industries. So, right now I'm pretty good at assessing an opportunity pretty quickly.
Right.
But back then, after maybe being on my own for 6 months, one of my former McKinsey clients, a guy by the name of Russ Bernard, who had been VP of Marketing at Columbia Records, when Columbia Records was a client, Russ asked if he could join me if he resigned his position at Columbia. And I told him, I can't pay you.
Right.
But if you're willing to take a shot, then we can make this successful.
Find deals and get a percentage of what's going on.
Yeah, and eat part of what you kill.
Right.
That'd be great.
So he joined you?
So Russell joined me.
Okay.
And then to keep the wolf at bay, the two of us took on a couple of consulting projects, one of which was with a New York Stock Exchange company by the name of Melville Corporation. That was a multi-retail chain. And we did a project looking at whether Melville should open a chain of record stores. And we did it for the executive VP of the company, the number 2 guy, Spencer Ottinger. And at the end of the project, Spencer was in his mid-60s. Spencer said, I'm getting ready to retire from here. I'd like to come hang out with you guys. You don't need to pay me. But
even better.
But if you could use some help by a third person, I'd love to join you guys. So,
and these consulting deals are really to keep cash flow coming in the door, keep the lights on, feed your family.
Right.
Okay.
And the other thing we did, when you're an entrepreneur, you got to find ways to be really cost effective. So we took on a client by the name of American Girl Services, which was a part-time temp agency.
Okay.
We took them on trying to raise money for the company. But in exchange for, instead of getting fees, which they didn't have to pay us, they gave us office space in their Fifth Avenue office. So now all of a sudden the 3 of us have offices on Fifth Avenue that we bartered with one of our clients.
So they were placing like temporary secretaries, whatever when the women were doing in those days.
Right.
All women.
Right.
Okay. Now you got free office space. That's
we got free office space, and we're doing occasional consulting, and we're looking at just a boatload of deals that came to us. So we saw deals in all kinds of sectors. We had developed a relationship when I was at MIT. I developed a relationship with a marketing professor at Harvard, a guy by the name of Ted Levitt, because I also took courses at the Harvard B School.
Right, because people don't know, MIT and Harvard are kind of right next to each other in Boston.
So that might have helped me get into McKinsey, that at least had courses at the Harvard B School. I kept him up to date on what I was doing. And Ted Levitt started to send us deals. And he sent us several interesting deals, most of which were from outside the country.
Okay.
So we wound up looking at deals essentially around the world. Israel, Brazil, Barbados. And we looked at deals in manufacturing, real estate, movie production, medical devices.
So do you remember what your first deal was and how long it took to find the deal?
Yeah, the first real significant deal we did, we wound up helping Jan Winter launch Rolling Stone magazine.
Okay.
He was just starting in his mother's house with the magazine. He hit it off. We hit it off with him. He hit it off with us. Russell had background in the music industry. I had consulted with Columbia Records.
Right.
So we had some things in common. So we actually, we didn't raise any money for Jan because he was close to closing his own deal. But we actually spent about a year working with him, opening up the East Coast of Rolling Stone's operation. Okay. So that got us involved in the publishing industry, putting together ad sales material, going out selling advertising, finding writers, finding photographers, renting office space.
So really building the operation.
Really building the operation.
So he came from the West Coast?
West Coast.
Okay.
Our business model was changing.
Right.
Not only were we raising money for companies, but we were providing strategic guidance for companies, which is one of the reasons I now position myself as a growth strategist. The other thing that happened is because of Spencer's contacts, we started to get consulting engagement by corporate investors in deals that were going south, that were in trouble.
Okay.
And the first one of those, the first big one that we really worked on was for an investment group, Bessemer Securities. They had taken over ownership of a chain of photo shops called Photomat.
Yeah, I remember
that was in trouble.
Yeah.
So they engaged our three-man firm, which we call KBO, Killion, Bernard, Nottinger, to help them think through how to turn around.
So you became turnaround specialist.
Became turnaround specialist, and
I guess you turned it around because Photomat was pretty big back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, we turned it around
until film disappeared.
We turned them around and helped them sell the company.
Oh, okay.
We spent about 5 years looking at deals. We did 3 or 4 or 5 deals. I learned it's very tough to find entrepreneurial projects that really justify going out raising money for them. And as we got better at looking at deals, one of the interesting things we learned is that most early stage companies don't really need much money.
Right, they can bootstrap their way in.
And
the investors are going to want some sort of an exit strategy, which is always difficult.
Yeah, and my experience is very few privately held small companies ever really have an exit successfully because they don't go public.
Right.
And they don't get acquired.
It's like a job.
Yeah, so I think it's very tough to find investors for small deals.
Yeah, I think the angels and the venture capitalists out there, they're looking for the next $1 billion idea. They don't want to put $250,000 in a business that's going to make a few million.
Right. So
never get out of the business.
So I think the strategy that we sort of evolved is finding ways to minimize the amount of capital that these early stage companies needed. Source capital from strategic partners rather than just passive independent investors.
That could help with the business, not just money-wise.
And had other reasons to be involved with the business.
And how were you guys getting paid at the time? Was that part of the money you raised? Or
yeah, but that was part of our problem because our fee structure was, in the first few years, was based on taking a percentage of the money raised.
Right.
Plus getting some options on some stock.
Right.
But as we got smarter at teaching these people how they didn't need to raise as much money as possible.
Right, now you're hurting your fees.
We're hurting our fees.
Right, now you're getting stock in companies that really can't sell, right? It's not worth anything.
Right. So after 5 years, I mean, it was a very exciting way to live. We were meeting a lot of very motivated, interesting people with interesting ideas, most of which never came to fruition. But we were essentially seeing new things every day. And I would say that's really where I got my PhD in entrepreneurship.
Okay.
I just saw so many deals.
Yeah, looking after business.
And we met with so many people, good people, bad people, crooked people, honest people.
Right.
We found a lot of fraud in the deals that we were looking at.
People, and they look at it as, they call it fudging the numbers.
Right.
But really it is fraud.
Fudging not only the numbers, but fudging patent application.
Like they didn't have patents.
They didn't have patents. In one case, we grew suspicious of a guy from Washington who had a new technology product. And one day I woke up and I thought something's the matter with this guy. So I had a cousin going to college down in Washington, D.C. And I asked John to go over and tell me what is at this address in D.C. And John went over that night and he called me the next day. He says, it's an empty lot.
Nothing. Totally fake.
Yeah, totally fake. So
yeah, I've had clients over the years that put money into deals and they were taken by supposed owners of companies to see buildings and operations, and it turns out it wasn't their operations. All the paperwork was forged.
Right.
That's what criminals do.
We really became, I think, experts at looking at deals, assessing deals, creatively coming up with concepts for growing early stage companies. So at the end of 5 years, I sat down with Russell and Spencer and I said, this is all very fun. We're having interesting times every day. but we have a lousy business model.
Yeah, it wasn't really profitable for you guys. You were helping a lot of people, learning a lot of stuff. There's no profit margin.
Right. So I said, if we're so smart, why don't we start our own business, go out and raise our own money?
Makes sense.
And see if we're as good as...
You just got a PhD in it, right?
Yeah. So they agreed. So now we're challenged with what idea do we want to pursue. Back then, I wanted to start an investment advisory service for individual investors that I think would still work today. And I went so far as to do a test mailing with the idea to members of YPO, the Young Presidents Organization.
Okay.
And I got like a 20% positive response rate, which is unheard of in a direct mail campaign.
Not at all.
So we could have started that business.
Right. And there weren't investment advisory companies all over the place in those days, right?
No, we were way ahead of the curve.
Right.
And again, the focus was going to be on finding small, publicly owned companies that were not being covered by Wall Street, where we could provide some strategic guidance to the company and get paid by individual investors to find and track these companies.
So they were small public companies, but they were so small that the analysts weren't that interested in them.
Right. So, and I think that idea would still fly today.
Probably. There's a lot of penny stock small companies, right?
My partner, Russ Bernard, coming out of the music industry, and with our successful Rolling Stone experience, thought we should start the first national country music magazine.
Okay.
There was no high-quality national country music magazine. This was in the early 70s.
Okay.
Mid-70s, I guess. So we debated back and forth, and I said we could start my business essentially without raising money. We decided we would have to raise $500,000.
Your business being the investment advisory business.
Investment advisory business.
Okay.
And we decided we would have to raise about $500,000 to start a new national country music magazine. And we're debating.
This was what? That's a lot of money in the 70s.
A ton of money.
Right.
And, we had, although we had run across a lot of investors, we hadn't necessarily run across investors looking for startup country music magazine deals.
Right.
That was kind of a unique thing.
You said it didn't exist.
Didn't exist.
Right, okay.
So one day I was reading the New York Times and I saw an article that Harper's Magazine was in financial trouble. So I called my two partners up and I said, I'll make you a deal. Let's call the owners of Harper's, which turned out to be a newspaper chain in Minneapolis, the Minneapolis Star and Tribune Company, and see if we can talk them into hiring us to turn around Harper's. But they also would have to put up $500,000 and they could own part of a startup country music magazine.
Now, how did you come across this deal?
I saw an article in the New York Times that Harper's was in trouble.
Is that Harper's Bazaar?
No, Harper's Magazine is the oldest general interest magazine in the country.
Does it still exist today?
Yeah, it still exists today.
Okay, so Harper's Magazine, you didn't have any contacts there.
We didn't have any contacts.
You just saw an ad in the newspaper,
right,
or an article that was written about the company.
Right.
You reached out to them.
Right.
Okay.
So
this is a great story, by the way.
I told my two partners, let's call the Minneapolis Star and Tribune Company, see if we can put together a two-part deal where they retain our firm to turn around Harper's and they put up the money to start Country Music Magazine. So we flipped a coin. I lost. I had to make the call. I called the CEO of the Minneapolis Star and Tribune Company, told his secretary that I had a new business opportunity and also some suggestions on improving the situation at Harper's, and I needed 10 minutes to talk to him on the phone. So she put me through, and I had the conversation. It ran longer than 10 minutes. Within a couple of weeks, he came to New York to meet the three of us.
He came out to see you guys.
He came out to see us, and we went to dinner with him, and we talked about our experience with Rolling Stone, and we went through our backgrounds and what we had all done. We all had successful educational backgrounds. Yale was also where Russell went as an engineer, and Spencer had been to Brown University and Harvard Business School.
Yeah, so you weren't a bunch of idiots.
No,
you went to the top schools in the country.
Yeah, and we all had done successful things. I had worked in Europe. I'd worked for McKinsey. We spent 5 years in this. We were able to convince him that this made sense. So he had us come out and do a presentation to their board. Lo and behold, they wound up retaining our firm, KBO, to be the publisher of Harper's. And they also put up a check for $500,000. And we gave them half the equity in Country Music Magazine.
So let's back up for a second. Let's think how crazy this is. So you're going to this company that you've already read are having trouble. And you're going to them and say, hey, we can fix your problems and help you with the trouble, but
But
we also want you to write a check, not even knowing when they had the money,
right,
for $500,000 to start a country western magazine. Remember the name? Was it Country Western Magazine?
It was called Country Music.
Country Music. Okay.
Country
Does it
Music
still exist today?
I'm not sure, but it ran at least 30 years. I think it probably does exist today in some form.
So basically, you took over Harper's Magazine,
right?
Really on a temporary basis, just to turn them around,
right?
But you owned part of the company?
No, we didn't own Harper's. But
okay, you worked for Harper's, but then you became a 50-50 owner in this new startup,
right? In
a country and western magazine that didn't exist,
right?
And there wasn't any competition. Nobody had a magazine.
No.
So who knows if it even worked? Okay,
right.
So you must have been one hell of a salesman to convince this guy, 3 kids from New Jersey,
right,
to the guy in Minneapolis. Or New York at that point, I guess.
My third partner, Spencer, wasn't a kid. He was in his late 60s.
Right, okay. So he brought some silver to the
Spencer
table.
Spencer was one of the toughest, soundest person that I've ever met. He was just really great. And he added a lot in terms of credibility and judgment and wisdom. So if you're going to start your own company, make certain that you're surrounding yourself with people who can really add value.
Sure.
And one of the lessons I learned in that 5-year period of looking at deals is I would never suggest that an investor put money into a company that is essentially a one-person company.
Right.
They could have 100 people working in it, but if it's only one person really running it, stay away.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, you really need a good management team.
So
nobody can do everything themselves, right?
So part of the reason we're successful dealing with the Minneapolis Star and Tribune Company is that we had spent these 5 years really sharpening our networking skills and got very good at reaching out to people and being able to concisely describe what we're trying to accomplish and finding ways to build relationships. Although I started off leaving McKinsey without any networking skills, by the time we finished this 5-year period, I was getting better and better every day.
You were an expert.
And if you want to be successful as an entrepreneur, I think you really need to have really strong networking and relationship development skills. That's more important than having a lot of money in the bank.
For sure.
For sure.
You can always find the money if you have the connection.
Right. To raise the money from the company out in Minneapolis, we had a real in-depth business plan we put together. I've got all kinds of views on business plans, but we had a business plan that showed month by month what the revenues were going to be from ad sales and everything. And before we started the magazine, we went to all the record companies. We showed them like a 10-page, 12-page preview issue of what the magazine was going to look like.
This is the Country Western
Country Music Magazine.
Okay.
Showed them what it was going to look like, 4-color, great photography, top-notch artists on the cover, interesting articles. And they all said they loved the idea, that they would support it, would devote a big chunk of their advertising bucks to the magazine. So we thought we were in great shape. And then...
so was a lot of this getting done in Nashville because of Country Western?
No. It should have been done in Nashville.
Oh, okay.
It should have been done in Nashville. And one of the early problems we ran into is actually resentment from some of the leaders in the industry, because these 3 Ivy League hotshots were starting this company from Park Avenue.
Right.
Because we launched Country Music.
You weren't in Nashville.
We weren't in Nashville. And we put Country Music Magazine's office in the same building as Harper's. So we could run up.
Because you were right there. You had to be in the same place.
Yeah, so we could run up and down the stairs and exchange ideas. And the day we got our check for $500,000, back in those days, I used to wear nice suits, nice Italian suits, and great shoes. I don't even have a suit now. The day we got the check, I had the check in my pocket when I was going home, and I called Judy up, and I told her again I was going to be late. I'm also often calling her, telling her I'm going to be late.
Right, and by the way, you and Judy are still together.
Right.
You have children, you've had a long life together. Right. She stuck with you all the way through this time.
Right, and we both have gray hair.
Right.
I called her up and I said, I'm going to be late. And she said, what are you going to do? I said, well, we just got the money to start Country Music Magazine. I'm going to go find a country music bar because I don't know anything about country music. So I looked in the yellow pages.
Now, did your partner, the one who was at Columbia Music, did he know anything about country music?
He knew a lot about country music, but the way we divided up the responsibilities of running Harper's and running country music, my partner Russell, who knew country music, wanted to work on Harper's because he was really interested in all the sexy people that were writing for Harper's.
Right.
Mario Puzo, who wrote The Godfather, Kurt Vonnegut. So Russell sort of fell in love with George Plimpton. So he fell in love with the glamour of Harper's. And
he wasn't so interested in
country music. So I wound up running country music with, day-to-day responsibility, but also being involved with Harper's without knowing very much about the industry. So I found a country music bar in Carlstadt, New Jersey on my way home. Stopped at the bar. I'm sitting at the bar sipping a beer because I don't really drink in my three-piece Italian suit. And eventually the bartender, a woman, comes over and she said, "What are you doing here? You're so out of place." It was like a biker bar.
Right.
And I told her what I was doing.
Carlstadt, New Jersey, the center of country music in the Northeast, right?
Right. So I told her what I was doing. She got really excited. It turned out she and her husband owned the bar, and he was in the back of the bar playing in a three-man group. And when the group took a break, she brought him over, introduced us. He got excited, and he said, "This is really great. The industry really needs what you're proposing to do. We live upstairs, and the bar closes at 1. You got to stay. Come upstairs and tell us all about this project and see how we can help." So I called Judy up again, and I said, "This could be an all-nighter."
Later than you said you were going to be
It's going to be an all-nighter. So at 1 o'clock, I go upstairs to their apartment, and I spent till like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning with them, just learning country music, getting their advice on who we should put on the cover, who in Nashville we should get to help us, who could write for us, what are the artists we should cover, what should be the different sections of the magazine. And those notes from that meeting became our actual business plan. I never went back and referred to the business plan again.
That was it.
That was it. And
you remember this guy's name? What his name was?
Yeah, Fran and Max Sullivan.
And were they pretty big in country music? Or
yeah, the bar was a country music bar. On a local basis, they were big in the country bar.
Okay.
And right in the middle of the night, this is another strange part of it, they were friends with Les Paul, the guitarist.
Yeah, sure.
And he lived near them. So they called him in the middle of the night and said, "We got this guy sitting in our apartment telling us about his idea to start a country music magazine. You got to come over and meet him." So Les Paul came over in his pajamas, in a bathrobe and slippers, and he sat in for a couple hours adding his 2 cents.
A couple hours? It's like dawn now.
Right. So that really became the foundation of how we started the magazine.
Wow.
I stayed with the magazines. We stayed with Harper's for a couple of years. Eventually got it turned around and sold.
Okay.
Then we were
the promise you made, right?
Yeah,
you would turn it around.
Yep. Okay. And that worked. Partway through that turnaround, they weren't particularly happy with the way the Harper's project was going. So the chairman called me.
The Star Tribune.
The Star Tribune. Okay. The chairman called me, asked me if he could meet with me. And I said, "Sure, I'll get my 2 partners." And he said, "We'd prefer just to meet with you." So I had dinner with them in New York. And they said they weren't happy with the way things were going at Harper's. They wanted me to be responsible for both projects.
But you weren't really involved with Harper's.
I wasn't
doing
really.
The country music thing.
So I said, "I'm not going to get rid of my partner. I can't do that." They said, "No, you don't have to do that. You can use Russell any way you want to use Russell. But we want you to be responsible for the results."
They want you to be the CEO or whatever the position was.
So I had to reluctantly agree.
Okay.
So I wound up running both companies. We eventually got Harper's cleaned up and sold it. And then the 3 of us were concentrating on country music magazine. When my dad died, he, at that time, was struggling with Killion Extruders. It's like a
that was the
plastic company in New Jersey, making plastic extruding equipment, about 12, 13 people in it. He drops dead one Saturday, and my father and I had had issues over a 10-year period, so I had not been involved in the business.
Your relationship was a little strange.
It was strange.
Which is common as we get older.
Yeah, it was really strange. We hadn't talked in several years.
Right.
And I get a call one Saturday morning. At that time, my father was in the horse racing business, owned a farm in New Jersey, unsuccessful in the horse racing business.
Now, is that what got you interested in horses, or
he got me interested? He got me interested in horses by taking me to the track.
To the track, okay.
It was many years later. When I was at McKinsey is when he bought the farm.
Okay.
And he started trying to breed horses. Had no success. He was using outside trainers. Very difficult, but very few people can keep their head above water.
Right.
So I get a call from the guy that was working with him on the farm one Saturday morning that my father just had a heart attack and died.
So he wasn't ill or anything?
He had heart issues.
How old was he at that point?
62.
Wow, young. And how old were you?
Was probably, I don't know, mid-30s.
Mid-30s, okay.
All right. So he died on a Saturday morning. I went up to the hospital, found him dead in one of the rooms. I went through his pockets. I got the keys to his office. After we got him situated in the funeral home that same day, I went down to his office to see what was going on.
Right.
I went through his desk, went through his checkbook, and I found that he had about $23 in the bank, owed over $2 million, most of which was personally guaranteed, had no receivables.
Right.
And I think the financial pressure is what caused the heart attack.
Probably,
because I'm sure he had no idea what to do Monday. He had no money for the payroll this coming week. So I called his accountant. I said, my father just passed away. I'm sitting at his desk. This is what I see. And he tells me, we've been talking to him about bankrupting the company. I said, but if you do that, if I understand what I'm looking at, they're going to be able to go after my mother's car, her teeth, her house. I said, I can't let that happen. So
because they own their assets jointly, right?
Yeah. So I said, I think I got to come in here and at least see if I can make it better.
Your father suddenly passed away. You were working on the country music magazine and Harper's, but you were in the city.
Right.
And his business was, where was it located?
He was in Verona, New Jersey.
Okay, right near where we all grew up.
And he had a two-man operation down in Florida.
That was part of the company.
That
they
was
just
part
had
of
an
the
office
company.
down there?
He didn't have an office. One of the guys that had been with him for a number of years developed a serious illness, wanted to move to Florida. And rather than have him go down there really to pass away, my father said, why don't you go find some small space and I'll send some machinery down there and you keep working for us down there.
Okay, so it was a small machine shop down there.
Yeah, two-man machine shop.
Okay, so your dad passes away. You take the keys. You go to the office. You realize they have no money.
Right.
A ton of debt.
Right.
Payroll hitting Monday.
Right. No, payroll hitting
people had to get
Friday.
paid.
Yeah, getting next Friday.
Okay, so you had a week. You had 5 days.
And I had no real experience with the company. And the only person...
You didn't really know his business at all,
No,
right?
I didn't really know his business. I only knew one person in the company. That was the guy down in Florida, Norm Brown.
So the one guy you knew wasn't even working in the Verona shop?
No. So
what'd you do?
So I called his accountant, and I told him, what had happened. And he talked about bankrupting. I said, no, we can't let that happen.
Yeah, because it's all going to fall on your mother's head, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I said, I think I got to come in here and see if I can make it better. He said, you're already running two companies. Right. Meanwhile, my father had a farm. He had bought this farm.
That might have been a lot of the drain of the resources, right?
50-acre farm in Morris County, New Jersey.
Right. The big horse country in New Jersey.
He agreed to meet with me on Sunday. It turns out he was one of the executors of my father's estate. The other guy was a lawyer from Montclair. So
there were two executors, the lawyer and the CPA.
And my father's will said, sell everything and put it into trust primarily for my mother. So
you can't sell a company that's got $2 million in debt and $23 in the bank.
Right.
Right.
At that time, my father had 10 horses that weren't worth anything.
Right.
He had this 50-acre farm with a mortgage on it.
Is that where they lived, or this was in addition to where they...
That's where they lived.
Okay.
I met with the executors on Sunday, and I convinced them that, I was willing to put in the effort to try to make a difference while I was continuing to run country music in Harper's.
Right. Because you just made a deal with those guys. You couldn't just walk away from that.
No.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay. So they agreed to have me come in on Monday and start, see what I could do. One of the hard decisions I made, which is I still have second thoughts about it today, I never put an obituary out on my father because I didn't want anybody to know.
It would affect the business, right?
Yeah. And the employees.
Right.
If any of the employees had seen my father pass away, they wouldn't have come back to work.
Right, so why broadcast it?
Yeah, so nobody knew my father died for months.
Well, that probably helped you, though.
Yeah.
It helped them.
Yeah.
And your mother.
When people would call the company and ask for Mr. Killion, I'd get on the phone and...
You were Mr. Killion.
Didn't tell him I was the wrong one.
Right.
I took my father's car that Monday, put it in this parking spot, went into his office before anybody else got to work. When everybody showed up at work, the work hours were 7:30.
They saw his car.
Saw his car.
Yeah.
They went out and start working.
You're behind closed doors.
I'm behind closed doors. A few minutes after everybody's there, I walk out into the plant floor. I tell everybody shut the machines off. I introduced myself. I described what happened.
Right. You said you had an estranged relationship with your dad, so you've never met these people?
I never met them.
They might have not known you existed.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So
changing their life that day.
Right. So I said, I have no idea whether I can save the company, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I said, I only have enough personal money to make the payroll that will be due on Friday. So if I can't come up with some clever solutions by Friday, I'm not sure what happens next. I said, but if you're willing to give me a chance and if you're willing to see what happens, then go back to doing what you're doing because I can't help you do what you're doing.
Right. It's only 5 days, right? Yeah. So they know they're getting paid Friday. Right. It's not like you asked them for 6 months. I said, see what happens.
Yeah, I said, but if you're not, if you want to give me a shot, just go back to doing what you do. Otherwise, if you're afraid, I guess you should leave. So nobody left.
Okay.
And
they didn't have much to lose at that point, right? You couldn't find a job in 2 days, so you could wait a week. What's the big deal, right?
So for all you entrepreneurs out there, what would you do if you took over a company that had $23 in the bank, a couple $1 million, and you only had personal payroll for 1 week? What do you do?
I don't know.
Mitch is shaking his head.
I don't know what you do. I mean, luckily the $2 million wasn't your personal thing, so you still had good credit. Right. You could go out and get a bank loan or something, but you got to remember the bank's now saying, "Okay, Mr. Killian, we're going to loan you money for your dad's failing company that's got $2 million of debt to keep the employees in place." Right. That's a tough sell.
So because I had spent 5 years looking at companies in all different stages of success or failure, knew quite a bit about how to raise debt funding or equity funding. I knew this company.
That side of the business you knew. You just didn't know your dad's business.
Yeah, right. But I also realized nobody's going to invest in this company. No bank is going to lend additional money.
Right.
No shot. What do I do? So I went to my father's office. I told his secretary, give me a list of everybody we owe money to, from the largest to the smallest. Everybody. I want a complete list.
So it wasn't like a $2 million credit line with one lender. It was a whole slew of
suppliers.
All kinds of people that were owed
money. All kinds of suppliers.
Okay.
Insurance companies, we were late on premiums, everything. She gave me a list of people we owed money to. I said, I'm going to go in and start calling everyone. When the phone light goes off, dial the next one. So I sat there for about a day and a half, and I talked to everybody that we owed money to. And I described the situation. I said, we have no money, so if you get tough and come after us, you're not going to get anything. I said, so what I propose is that for the suppliers, I said, what I propose is that you put us on COD immediately, because I assume we're going to have, if we can save the company, I assume we're going to have to work with you.
Right.
But I don't think you should go in any deeper with us.
Right, so you'll pay put us on, going forward.
Going forward, we'll pay as we go. I'll somehow find enough money to do that.
I think that's a really good lesson for people because you and I both, we run into a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners that are in trouble. And sometimes, a lot of times, if you get in front of your problems and you're honest with people and you just go to them and say, hey, we're having problems because 99% of people do have problems in their life.
Right.
I want to work it out. I don't want you guys to lose. Right. We don't want to lose. Right. Let's work together. 99 out of 100 times, people are going to work with you. And in some cases, they don't have a choice.
Right.
Because they're going to get a worse result if they don't. So, so go on.
So I said, put us on COD, and then every Friday, I will send you a note with the progress that we've made in improving the company. And if I can, I'll stick a little money in the letter. Might be $5, might be $20, might be $100. Extra. Just against the
old balance.
Against the old balance.
Right. Now, just so I understand, and people listening, the company was still doing business. So it had accounts, it had jobs it was doing. So there was cash flow coming in the door.
There wasn't much work in progress.
Okay.
Which was one of the issues. My father did not have a sales force.
Okay.
He was the sales guy.
Okay.
So he was the everything in the company with
That's why he's falling behind.
With an eighth grade education.
Okay.
So he got as far as he got basically on brute strength and energy and
But how
commitment.
Did you start building up the jobs, the work?
So anyway, to finish the story with the suppliers, every supplier agreed with what I proposed. So that took, including the banks. So that took the immediate heat off of having to pay back bills.
Right.
Then the second day, I told Jeanette, get everybody.
This was Monday, the first day. You dealt with the employees. You shocked them with this news, and then you called all the creditors.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So it's been only 24 hours.
Right.
Okay.
And meanwhile, I'm still doing things with Harper's and country music.
Right, you got that going on,
I got that going on, too. And my mother couldn't take care of the horses. So now I'm running up to the farm, feeding horses twice a day.
Oh, my goodness.
And cleaning stalls.
Oh. Were there people at the... No, because they didn't have the money, right? So nobody's even taking care of the horses out there.
And there's 10 horses.
And I have some clients in the horse business now. I understand what it takes. It takes a lot.
Right.
Horses make a lot of manure.
Right.
They need their stalls cleaned out every day. They need feed. They need shaving.
Right. So I was up there twice a day.
The farrier, the whole thing.
So anyway, the second day, I started calling the companies that we had work in process with.
Okay.
And these were mostly
customers.
Customers.
Okay.
These were mostly big companies where we're building custom equipment, not things you could buy off the shelf.
Right.
So, and they were companies like DuPont, Monsanto,
plastic companies.
3M.
Right. Big company.
Baxter Travenol.
Were they big then? They were big.
Yeah, big.
Yeah.
So I called them up and I introduced myself. I described the condition of the company. All of these companies had put up either a 25 or a third deposit, and we're partway through the job. And I said, we don't have any money to finish your job. And if you sue us, you're not going to get anything because we don't have any money. And if you want to go to try and find somebody else, I think you're going to have a tough time finding another supplier, at least on a short-term basis.
Right.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to Killion Extrusion in the first place to get us through the hump. I'm asking you to prepay your balance by Friday.
Wow.
I said, if you prepay your balance by Friday, we're going to have enough cash to finish your job on schedule. And you'll get what you originally bargained for. If you don't do that, I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Right.
I got every company to prepay by Friday.
Wow.
There was only one company, a smaller company from Detroit, Jack Clark, who had a company making brushes for automobile cleaning places.
Uh-huh.
The big brushes.
For like car washes?
Car washes.
Like
and he used the extruders to produce the bristles.
Ah.
He wanted to come meet with me. He was a one-man, sole owner of his business. So he flew in from Detroit on Friday. We went out to lunch. And I guess he wanted to look me in the eye and see whether he
tell him the truth or not.
Tell him the truth or not.
Right.
I walked him through the shop. I showed him the status of his job. And after lunch, he gave me a check for the balance. And so I got 100% of the existing companies to prepay.
Pay. So now you had cash in the bank.
Now we had cash
in the payroll.
Yeah. And I never raised a dime for that company. I never took on additional debt, and I never sold any equity in the company. The guy down in Florida was the closest in skills to my dad. So the day of my father's funeral, afterwards I pulled him aside. I said, I'm going to try to save the company, and I need you to do it, or maybe you can save the company. If you want to try to do it, I don't have to be involved.
Yeah, you got 16 other businesses you're running.
He said,
the last thing you need.
He said, I don't know how to save a company.
Right.
He was also a high school guy.
Right.
So I said, well, why don't I buy the company? And when I buy it, I'll give you half of it.
Okay.
So eventually I bought the company for $25,000 and a note to take on the debt myself. So I switched the debt out of my father's estate and took it on myself.
Wow.
And the bank agreed to let me do that.
Okay.
And when I bought the company, I gave Norm 50% of it and on a handshake basis, which I'm sure Mitch would think might not be the smartest thing in the world, but
probably not, but you knew him a long time, with your dad a long time.
We worked together for 10 years on a handshake, and it worked great.
Okay. Now, what was the strategic reason for buying the company from the estate? $25,000 probably wasn't even worth that much at that point, and taking on the debt. What was the strategic reason for doing that?
The executors had to sell the company. That was part of their instructions in the will.
Nobody going to buy it.
Nobody going to buy it.
Right.
The bank wasn't going to let the estate go.
Right. They're not going to sit there all forever.
Right. So they would have gone after my father's estate.
Right.
If I didn't negotiate.
So an outsider's not going to take on the debt. They're just going to buy the assets.
No.
Right. Okay.
There were no assets, really.
Right.
A small little building.
The operation, right. And that got your mom out from underneath.
Got my mom out from under.
Okay.
To really complicate my life, because I had this passion for horse racing.
Right.
I convinced the executors to give me an option to buy the farm. They were instructed to sell everything for the top value.
Here's a word from our sponsors. Looking to get into podcasting? Maybe to market your business, for your own enjoyment, or because you have a message you want to get out there. One of One Productions is a New Jersey-based studio just over the George Washington Bridge that caters to the booming business of podcasting. They offer a comfortable atmosphere using the latest technology available to record your podcast. And they are a full-service media company offering both audio and video production services, creating both audio and video podcasts as well as video shorts for business and personal use. Professional audio equipment packages are available through their website for all budgets, and be sure to check out their podcast guesting kit, created specially for our listeners. Care for your health, care for the planet, and look flippin' great doing it. North Authentic is a conscious hair care marketplace offering the cleanest brands from around the world. Their pro stylists curate only the most fabulous non-toxic hair products with better-for-you shampoos, serums, masks, and more that actually give you gorgeous hair without hurting your health or the planet. Hey, you've only got one life, one planet, and one glorious mane. Might as well treat them all as best you can, right? Try a 100% clean hair care routine prescribed just for you using their link in the show notes. If you don't see a big, beautiful difference in how your hair looks and feels, you can tell them they're crazy. Do you battle chronic pain, stress, anxiety, or depression? Well, if you take any supplements or you're interested in natural alternatives, you need to know about findyourhealthyplace.com. Find Your Healthy Place has thousands of supplements to help you live a better quality of life, as well as natural solutions for chronic pain, stress, anxiety, depression, sleeplessness, and much, much more. Need guidance? Use their live chat feature and talk to a wellness consultant right on their website. And be sure to use our coupon code TAEPodcast for all your purchases to get the best prices at findyourhealthyplace.com. Follow their links in the show notes to learn more about all of our sponsors. And now back to our show.
What was the farm worth at the time? 70s, right?
Yeah, 50 acres in Morris County. It's worth a fair amount of money.
Yeah.
Prime real estate.
Right. That's where his money was. It was in the ground.
Right. It was in the real estate.
Would that have been enough to pay off the creditors of the company and pulled it up? No, it wasn't worth that much.
No.
Okay.
They were instructed to sell everything. Sell the 10 horses, sell Killion Extruders, sell the farm. Well, there was not going to be any buyer for Killion Extruders other than me.
Right.
Because I was willing to take on that risk personally and that commitment of my energy. They agreed to give me and Judy a 30-day window to match the highest offer they got on the farm.
Right, because they had a fiduciary obligation in the estate to get the best price for the real estate.
Right.
Business is a different story. You're taking over the debt. It's got no value.
And for the horses. Right. So I put them in touch with a horse trainer who came up, looked at the horses, and gave them an evaluation. He valued 10 racehorses in different stages of age and repair, and 10 of them he valued at $28,000. Total. Nothing.
Right.
So the 10 of them were worth nothing.
Right.
But that was the value he assigned to them.
Well, were they usable? I mean, they would race, or they really past their prime?
Most of them were. There were a couple you could breed, but they didn't have any fancy bloodlines.
Right.
Most of them had injuries, would never race.
Yeah, so they're worthless.
So worthless. They agreed to give me the 30-day option to buy the farm, match the highest offer, but I had to agree to buy the horses. That's part of it. Okay. So I gave them a note for $28,000, and I owned the horses before I owned the farm.
But you had to leave them there, and nowhere
else to put them. So now I got 30 days to raise the money to the farm, and I got about $2,000 of cash.
And how much did you need to buy the farm? What was the
several hundred thousand?
Several $100,000? Okay.
All you entrepreneurs out there, how do you raise several $100,000 in 30 days?
For raw land that doesn't have a cash flow in it.
So I'm thinking. I was down in Kentucky selling advertising for country music.
You couldn't go to the bank and get a mortgage? You can get a loan?
I had nothing.
I guess you just took on millions of dollars of debt from your dad's business. Right. Okay.
So I was not bankable.
Right.
So I'm down in Kentucky selling advertising to the cigarette companies for Country Music Magazine. I've been racking my brain. I figured the only person I can call, again, developing my networking skills.
Right.
I could maybe cold call the Secretary of Agriculture in Washington.
Secretary of Agriculture of the United States.
Right.
Okay.
So I asked the receptionist at Brown & Williams, could I use your phone? She said, sure. So I put in a call to the Secretary of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Right.
I didn't get him on the phone, but I got his assistant. I'm looking for some help from the Department of Agriculture. I've got 30 days to get enough money together to buy a farm. Okay. Otherwise, they're going to turn it into a housing development.
Was that true?
Yeah.
The buyer was going to put tract housing on the property. Right. Okay.
So I said, I'm sure the Department of Agriculture would prefer to keep 50 acres, prime acres in New Jersey as a farm, as opposed to just another housing development.
Okay.
Do you have any programs to help guys like me raise money to buy a farm?
Right.
So they didn't put me through to the secretary, but they put me through to one of his top assistants.
Okay.
And I told him the story again, and he said, yeah, we have programs. We have an office in New Jersey. I'll make a call to introduce you to the head of the office. Go up there, talk to them, see what they can do to help you.
Now, this just occurred to you, like maybe there's government programs out there?
Right.
Okay.
No previous knowledge of just racking my brain. Took a shot.
Okay.
Like we took a shot calling the Minneapolis Star-Tribune.
Right. Well, that at least you saw an article.
Yeah.
You know they were having trouble.
Took a shot.
Okay. Yeah, they could have told you we have no programs or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
When I got back from that sales trip, I called the office in New Jersey. I went up to meet them. They told me they had a couple of programs where they could loan me money, even though I had this debt from the company.
But they're not a bank; it's the government.
Yeah, and the land was going to be the asset for this deal. I didn't own the land when I did the deal with the bank.
Right.
So that was not part of the assets I was pledging to the bank.
Right.
For the company.
It wasn't encumbered. You didn't own it.
Right. So they said they could loan me, I forget, 75 or 80% of the money I needed.
Okay.
So I'm racking my brains. Where do I come up with the balance? Because I still don't have any money. And the only asset I had at the time was my equity ownership in Country Music Magazine.
Right. Okay. You owned 50%.
I owned a third of 50%.
Oh, right. Because the Star Tribune owned half.
Right.
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 Okay. So you owned that's third. So a sixth of the business.
Right.
Okay.
So I called my friend, the chairman of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune Company. I said, I'd like to make a proposal. He said, what's your proposal? I said, I want to sell you my share of Country Music Magazine for X dollars. And X dollars was the amount I was missing to buy the farm.
Right.
He said, why do you want to get out of country music? You're doing a great job. The company's being successful. And I said, because I told him the story. I said, I want to buy the farm. I have no other assets.
Told him the story. Your dad had passed away and you took over the company and everything.
So I said, the only asset I have is equity in Country Music Magazine. And he said, well, we don't want to lose you. You're doing a great job. And I said, you're not going to lose me. It's not going to change how I work. I'll still do what I'm doing.
You're still going to stay on with them, along with the horses, along with your dad's business. Right. Okay.
I said, but while we're talking about this, I said, me and Russell and Spencer should figure out a way to buy you out of country music because I'm going to be running around like crazy and I'm the guy that you're relying on to run it. So we should be thinking about an exit strategy for you. But in the meantime, I'd like to sell you my equity. He said, well, I don't think we want to do that. You're involved with Harper's. You're doing a great job of both.
I thought Harper's was sold, not at that point.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. He said, but I'll get back. Let me talk to some people here, but I don't think we're going to do this. So he called me the next day. He said, Jack, he said, we're not going to loan you. We're not going to buy you out. He said, but there's a check in the mail. It should be to you today for what you need. We're going to loan it to you.
And so they gave you the money.
They gave me the money.
And they didn't want to buy yet. They wanted to keep skin in the game.
Right.
They
said, I'm going to put you in touch with our corporate attorney. You can work out a loan agreement between you and Judy and our company, but we don't want to lose you.
They didn't even want collateral.
They don't want
You were the collateral.
I was the collateral.
Okay, great.
So
they obviously liked you.
So that's how I got money to buy the farm.
Now is that where you live today?
Yeah.
In Tewksbury? It's the same land?
In Long Valley.
Long Valley.
We've been up there about 30 some odd years now.
Wow. And you told me recently that your son and his wife are moving there.
They're
buying.
You're
going to live on the property?
Right. Our son and his wife are going to buy the farm because he loves the farm.
Is he going to do more with horses, bring more?
No.
He just likes being out there in the land?
They're going to buy it. We live in a several hundred-year-old German farmhouse. So you put a big addition on, put a garage up, office over the garage, a swimming pool. They've been
for you? Okay,
no, for him.
For him, okay.
And they've been remodeling an apartment in the barn, which is bigger than our current house.
Now, when we did a Zoom call the other day online, was that where you were sitting?
Yeah.
I could see that there were things open.
The beams.
They're already doing work there and stuff? Yeah. Okay.
So
it's really going down. It's going to be third generation.
Right, third generation.
Wow.
So that sort of brings me round circle. I made two decisions that other entrepreneurs might think about. Now I'm running Walnut Farm.
Okay.
I'm running Killion Extruders. I'm still running Harper's.
Right, and you're still involved in the Country Music Magazine.
In Country Music Magazine. So I'm running 4 different businesses at once. And everyone deserved attention. I had to somehow be involved.
They needed your services, your skills, your intellect.
I had to be at the farm feeding and doing things. I had to be at Killion Extruders, answering the phone, talking to customers.
Right.
Motivating the employees.
Right. And it wasn't like today where you have a cell phone. If you're different places, people can still get a hold of you.
No cell phones.
None of that.
None of that.
Right.
No internet, no email, no nothing. It was letter, in person, or phone.
Right.
Landline.
You know, it's funny. To a certain extent, that might have helped you because the speed at which everything moved in those days, expectations were different.
Right.
So you didn't have people chasing you down saying, Jack, I got to talk to you now.
Right.
They would call your secretary. Secretary would have to find you. They'd have to send you a letter. It was different. Okay.
Right.
But there's plenty of entrepreneurs that run multiple businesses.
Right. I made 2 decisions that I think were really critical to the success I was able to have. First one, I stopped drinking anything. And I was never a big alcohol drinker.
Right, you don't mean anything. You mean alcohol.
Alcohol.
You still drank water and you nourished yourself.
Yeah, but no alcohol of any kind.
Out of your life.
Cold stop.
Okay.
Well, when I was in New York running the magazines, I'd be out at night.
Yeah, you have all these social events you had to go to, right?
But I realized I had to be absolutely clear-headed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Good advice.
And the other thing was I was out of shape, so I started jogging.
Okay.
And I realized I essentially felt like I had to turn myself into a weapon. I had to be absolutely really sharp, really fit.
Now, what year was this about?
Late 70s.
Okay, so fitness is starting to come on then also.
Yeah.
That was kind of coming into the public life.
So I start jogging every day, and I got myself to, now I don't jog, but I wish I did. But back then I could jog any distance. If somebody told me to go jog to the George Washington Bridge, I could have done that. So I got myself really physically fit, mentally fit.
Okay.
And I was running 4 businesses at once.
Right. Well, it's hard to do all that stuff if you're not taking care of yourself.
Right.
Which to a certain extent may have been one of your dad's problems he ran into.
Right. So I think all entrepreneurs
stress management
need to think about managing their health as well as managing their business.
Yeah.
I think the 2 things are totally linked together.
Right.
So anyway, the way things evolved, we got Harper sold, so that eliminated one of the stress points.
Right.
I convinced Russell and Spencer. I tried to give Russell and Spencer, my 2 partners in country music, a piece of Killion extruders.
Okay.
Because I was diverting my time, and they were not diverting their time. But they weren't interested in owning part of a privately held, small, struggling manufacturing company. So I got them to buy me out of Country Music Magazine.
And remember, the guy from Florida, what was his name?
Norm Brown.
So he owned 50% of the extrusion company.
He owned 50%.
Okay.
So Russell and Spencer didn't want to come into the manufacturing company. They bought me out of Country Music with a note.
Okay.
And they continued to
run
your
1/6 share.
My 1/6 share.
How did the Star Tribune feel about that? They wanted you to be involved.
Before I did the deal with Russell and Spencer, we bought the Star Tribune out.
So you owned 100% of the business, the 3 of you, and then they bought you out.
And we bought the Star and Tribune company out, and it was only after a couple of years of their being an investor in it, they made a nice substantial gain on their investment. So our phone call to them to turn around Harper's and get them involved in a startup really worked for them. They sold Harper's, and they got a return on their investment in country music.
So Russell, and what was your other partner's name?
Spencer.
So Russell and Spencer went off
and continued to run
Country Music
Magazine.
Okay, Harper's is now gone.
Harper's is gone. So now I'm running Killion Extruders.
Yeah, the horses.
And the horses.
Okay.
And early on with the horse business, I had other people training whatever horses we had at the track.
Okay.
But that was not being successful. So one day I said to Judy, if we're going to stay in the horse business, I think we have to totally integrate. We have to breed our own. I think we have to train our own.
So when you say train, you train them for racing and then sell the horses?
No.
Or they're racing for your farm?
Racing for our farm at the track.
Okay.
So, which meant either me or Judy every day would have to be at the racetrack.
And you win money out of a purse if the horse places.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I still live on a farm, so I spent 20 years breeding and training racehorses. Became pretty successful in the horse racing industry. I was elected president of the group in New Jersey that represents all the owners in the state. So I was the guy that was negotiating purses with the tracks.
So you only did racehorses. You didn't do equine jumpers, dressage.
No, I only did thoroughbred racehorses.
Okay.
And when we
like Lana Lobel Farms, right? They were a big racehorse.
They were trotters.
Trotters. Okay.
We were thoroughbreds.
Okay.
We spent 20 years breeding and training racehorses. Again, most of my entrepreneurial career has been bootstrapping companies. I never had a big financial backing. Because, again, I learned that you don't need much money to start and grow companies.
Money gets people in trouble.
Right. When we decided to start breeding our own, I started networking within the horse racing industry. So one of the things about networking is whatever business you're in at the time, you got to really develop an in-depth network
in that industry.
So in country music, I developed a network with artists and artist managers and radio stations and record companies.
Sure, you need that for content, for advertising, the whole thing.
And in the manufacturing companies with plastic companies and suppliers and industry associations and magazines.
Right, you want to be tied into what's going on in the industry, right?
I developed a robust network in the horse racing industry. We're looking for female horse to buy to breed. To be our foundation.
You had all males? Was that stallions?
Mostly males, but we didn't really have a good female.
Okay.
So I looked around. It took me a year to find one out of Belmont that was available for $1,500 from a prominent racing family. So I went out and looked, and it was a 3-year-old who had been injured. She had never run, would never run. The family and her mother had never really produced anything. So she essentially had very limited value. I looked at her. I looked at her bloodlines. I liked what I saw. I could see why she had physical problems. But for $1,500, we weren't going to do much better. So we bought her for $1,500.
And it wasn't like the kind of physical stuff that was going to pass on to...
Could have, but I was hoping I could find stallions that would overcome that.
Okay.
So we bought her for $1,500. And then I spent some time looking for an inexpensive stallion. I found one down in Maryland that we could breed to for $1,000. So we had a $1,500 female bred to a male for $1,000.
And you don't buy the stallion; it's a stud fee,
just for servicing the mare.
He impregnates your horse, and you pay him $1,000. Thank you very much.
Okay. So that was the first baby horse that we raised, that we delivered, raised, and the first baby horse that I ever trained off of Walnut Farm. And in her first year of running, she was ranked one of the top 10 females in America.
So she was making money.
She was making money.
Okay.
And the mother that we bought for $1,500 turned out to be a half-sister to Secretariat.
Really?
He was born...
How'd you figure that out?
He was born after her, from the same mother.
Ah, I see. Okay.
So he was born 3 or 4 years down the road after our...
Does that increase her value?
I eventually sold her for $250,000.
Wow. The one that you paid $1,500 for.
Right.
Unbelievable.
So again,
crazy business.
If you want to be successful as an entrepreneur, you have to really get in depth in your industry.
Right.
When Judy and I looked at going into that business, I said there's 3 parts to the business. First of all, the bloodline. So we're not going to have enough money to compete with the wealthiest people in the world, getting to the best stallions. So we're going to have to be very creative in finding females and finding males to put together.
Right.
I said, so they have an advantage in the breeding end. We have our own farm, so I think we can raise horses just as good as anybody else because we can buy the same feed. We can find a good vet, a good blacksmith.
Right.
So I think it's neutral raising the horse from birth to when they get to the track. And I said, at the track, I'm just egotistical enough to think I'm going to have an edge over most of these trainers.
Right.
I think I'm smarter than the average racehorse trainer.
Sure.
So I think we're going to have an edge with me training our own horses. And that turned out to be the true equation.
And you never trained a horse?
I'd never trained a horse.
Wow.
So that turned out to be the true equation.
Okay, and what about your dad's business? What happened to his business?
I continued to run that for 10 years.
Okay. Late 80s?
Late 80s. Turned it into a pretty successful company, from a regional 12 or 13 person company to an international company with over 125 employees. 3 locations.
Wow, so you're doing business all over the world.
All over the world.
Okay.
But that's a whole interesting story how I did that. Very early on, I knew that the world was going global, that we had to have a global presence. This is way before people were talking about globalization.
Right, sure.
So my wife had worked for a small software company, and one of their sales guys was really a terrific guy. And the software company was struggling. So I hired Don Miller to join Killion Extruders as the first salesperson the company ever had.
But he was in the software sales business? He was a salesman?
Yeah. Knew nothing about the plastic industry or
when you're a salesman, it doesn't matter if you're a good salesman.
So after he had been with us a couple of years, and the company had been stabilized, I took him out one night for dinner, and I said, Don, we've got to go international. And I said, so I think you should become VP of International Sales for Killion Extruders and figure out how to do this.
And he had only done stuff in the United States, right?
Right. And he said, I wouldn't have the first idea where to start. I said, me either.
Okay.
I said, but I think you should devote your time to figuring out how to start. Don started to look at trying to do things internationally. And again, I made a strategic cold call. Again, part of this networking skill that I developed. I figured who could help me figure out how to take a small New Jersey manufacturing company global. So I called the U.S. Department of Commerce in Washington, like I called the Department of Agriculture.
But everybody would do.
So I got somebody at the Commerce on the phone, and I told them, I said, we're a small manufacturing company in New Jersey with a small operation in Florida. I want to start to expand globally. I have no idea how to do that. Do you have any resources to help companies like ours do that? I said, yeah, we could probably help you. He said, where would you like to start? I said, I don't know, maybe Mexico, because it's relatively close.
This is like mid-'80s?
Yeah.
Okay.
He said, well, here's the name of a person at our embassy, our commercial attaché officer in our embassy in Mexico City. Call him, explain what you're trying to do, and see if they can help you.
And you were looking for customers to do business outside the United States, where you would provide custom equipment that you would create, then ship it to them.
Right.
Right. So Mexico, you're thinking there's companies down there that need custom equipment?
Well,
who knows?
Just because it was close.
Right. You didn't have to cross any water.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I could have gone to Canada.
Yeah, Canada maybe.
But I was already doing a little bit in Canada, so I want to think outside the box.
Okay.
So I called this guy and I got him on the phone, and he said, what would you like to do? And one of my philosophies as an entrepreneur, in every business I've been in, I like to create events to get potential customers coming to me. And I've done it in every industry. I did it in country music and publishing. I put on publishing events as joint ventures with NYU. I did it in the horse racing industry, where I put together events to attract new owners into the racing industry. So at Killion Extruders, I wanted to create events. So I told the people in Mexico at the embassy that I'd like to create a one-day event to talk about the American polymer processing technologies, positioned as experts from America coming down to share their knowledge. But I didn't have any contacts. I didn't know how to reach the plastic industry in Mexico. Could they help me? So we put together a deal where the embassy helped promote the event that we would put on.
This was going to be in Mexico?
In Mexico City, at the embassy.
At the embassy, okay.
They were going to host the event, pay for the food, pay to have simultaneous translations, and help spread the word in Mexico's plastic industry about the event. So we wound up with about 150 people coming to the embassy.
Wow.
To hear me and two guys from Killion Extruders essentially talk about what we're doing. Because we were on the early stage, cutting edge of things, because we were building custom equipment.
Right.
That really worked.
You know, sometimes it's not how big or small you are, it's how big or small your thinking is.
Right, totally.
You were a small company, but you're thinking big. They don't know.
They have no idea.
You're a company from the United States. You must be big.
Right.
It's irrelevant.
And we're positioning ourselves through the embassy as experts.
Right.
As industry experts.
Yeah.
We wound up selling quite a bit of equipment into Mexico, but then we repeated the process throughout Latin America. So I did the same thing in Venezuela. So when I hear all the problems going on in Venezuela, I've been there. I can visualize that.
Right.
We did it in Uruguay. We did it in Bogota, Colombia. Did it in Panama City. And over a period of a few years, we started developing a really robust business.
So South America and Central America.
Central America and South America.
Right.
And in the process, we wound up taking on a couple of independent sales reps in these markets. Yeah. So now we're starting to build an international sales organization. In the meantime, as the company grew, we outgrew the space that we originally had. In Verona.
Did you own that building?
We owned the building. We eventually sold the building, rented a much larger space in Cedar Grove, 25,000 square foot space.
A big facility.
Big facility where we had a nice conference room. They came up with the concept of putting together 1 week polymer processing workshops in New Jersey that we would conduct in Spanish by getting guys who worked in our factory who were Hispanic.
Right.
So they would come in and we'd do all of our slides in Spanish.
So you'd fly, these executives or whatever would fly in for a week?
They would fly in for a week.
With your company from Mexico or South America?
Right. And we would charge them $1,000 a person for the week.
Right.
And we could accommodate about 20 people in a week. So we were grossing $20,000 a week in fees.
Very little cost.
Very little cost. Lunches. Right. They would pay their own airfare and hotel.
Right.
They became our sales force when they went back into their companies. They had spent a week with us. They knew our people.
Right.
They knew we could do business fluently in Spanish.
You spoke the language.
So that became a strategy that we used in other parts of the world.
Okay.
So after 10 years of running the company, I got approached by a British company, public British company. They were looking to have a presence in the U.S. They were in the plastic industry. I had never really intended to be in the plastic manufacturing equipment business. My partner was about 15 years older than me. He was ready to bag it and retire.
Norm, the guy from Florida.
Right. It made sense for us to sell the company.
Okay.
So we sold the company to this British company. We both got a 3-year employment contract to continue running the business.
Right.
I took a lot of the strategies that I used to grow Killion Extruders over to the British company. I went on the board of the British company. My partner did not, but I went on the board of the British parent company.
Okay.
We did 10 high-tech acquisitions in 3 years in 3 different categories. In the plastic industry was one category. Specialty industrial furnaces was another category. And specialty instrumentation was the third category.
They're a big manufacturing conglomerate.
They're a big conglomerate. Hot shot stock on the London Exchange.
Okay.
I really had an impact on the company.
So this was like late 80s going into the 90s.
90s.
Okay.
One of the lessons I learned at Country Music Magazine that I now have applied in every entrepreneurial venture I've been in, you have to have multiple revenue streams. So like back in the country music days, in addition to getting income from selling copies of the magazine and advertising, we started publishing books. I probably published 40 books and to sell the books through the magazine. We created a weekly syndicated newspaper column through King Features. So we got money from writing a weekly column. We partnered with Suzuki Motorcycles to do a once-a-week, 1-hour country music magazine in-the-air radio show that we syndicated on over 200 stations. We evolved into being pretty big in direct mail marketing and wound up producing our own records and tapes that we sold on television. With country music, we had 7 or 8 different revenue streams.
I think that's really, really good advice for people because there's one thing that you and I both know, and that's things always change. They never stay the same. They change because of things that are in your control. They change because of things that are outside your control. And there's no business that's ever been successful selling one thing or doing one thing. If they're successful, they've evolved. Maybe they've stopped doing one thing, started doing another thing. And I think that the business owners that are successful, like you know and I know, that's exactly what they do. They grow their business, not just in terms of sales and one thing they do, with those different lines of business, and it protects them against economic changes and global changes and all that type of stuff. That's really good advice for people.
Right. With Killion Extruders, for example, first of all, I decided Killion Extruders' business model was not correct. My father had started and grown the company based on being an equipment manufacturing company. That's what he did, a custom equipment manufacturing company.
Yeah, they made the equipment that the plastics industry used.
Right.
And that's all they did.
Right.
That was their one line of business.
Right. And I thought that we didn't really have a big competitive edge, particularly with my father gone and his knowledge gone, because other competitors could buy similar components and put them together. So I thought we should really reinvent ourselves as a polymer processing problem solver. So once I
almost like a consultant, right?
I could consult. So I needed multiple revenue streams.
Right.
So the first thing I started doing was these programs in other countries, and eventually these workshops in New Jersey were generating $20,000 at a clip. So I started viewing education as a revenue stream.
Right.
And I started running conferences.
So both educated people and sold what you did.
Right. Sold what we did.
And didn't do it for free, which is, I think, is important.
Right. I also started doing 2-day conferences in America on different polymer processing topics, where I would charge people $300, $400, $500 to come to the conference and get 100 or 200 people coming to an event.
Now, you're not an expert on polymer processing.
No.
You brought the experts in to speak, right?
Right.
Were they people that work for the company or not necessarily?
Some are company, but to give it credibility, I'd get speakers from prominent companies, from DuPont or Monsanto or J&J. So when we sent out the invitations, it wasn't just from Killion Extruders. It was Killion Extruders and co-sponsors, those companies.
And they get PR out of it.
They get PR. They
exposure.
They get exposure. They're talking to a couple hundred people.
Right. Works for everybody.
And then when my dad still owned the company, companies would call us and ask if they could come in and use our equipment to do some testing that they were working on before they bought our equipment.
Yeah.
So they were consuming a lot of manpower on our part, so to see whether they could buy equipment from us.
Right.
So I decided to open a separate company called Killion Extruder Development, which was going to be a laboratory that companies could pay to use to do trial runs, test new products, new resins. So we opened that in New Jersey. I put it at another location so there'd be no confusion. So when potential customers called and asked if they could use our equipment, I could say, yes, we have a separate development company. Call Keith Luker, the head of it. He'll be happy to work with you. So the labs became a revenue stream, and I eventually opened labs in New Jersey, Florida, and California as a separate company. So we were doing conferences.
And you owned 100% of that company.
Owned 100% of that company. And if I had stayed with Killion Extruders and not sold it, I think I would have taken it into the publishing business. I think I would have started a polymer processing magazine to take advantage of my magazine.
Right, like a trade magazine.
Like a trade magazine.
Yeah.
As entrepreneurs, you need to be constantly thinking about how to diversify what you're offering. Because as Mitch says, things change. You got to be ahead of the curve.
Right, absolutely.
Going back to the sale of Killion Extruders, after 3 years, I got a call that Thermal Scientific that was the name of the buyer. Thermal Scientific had been approached about selling the whole company. They wanted me in London for the weekend to meet with the buyer and negotiate the deal because I was on the board.
So at that point, they had bought Killion Extruders. You were on the board. You helped them acquire, you said, 3 or 4 companies.
10 companies.
Now they got a buyer of the whole business.
Of the whole business.
Okay. It's a public company, though, right?
Yeah, public company.
Okay.
That's after my 3 years with them.
So after, you had already finished the 3-year contract. You weren't with them anymore. You were just on the board.
Right on the board. I was right at the end of finishing my 3-year period. So I flew over on a weekend. We met at Barclays Bank. We spent the weekend. We even slept in the facilities. Monday morning, we announced the sale of Thermal Scientific to a much larger, multi-billion-dollar British tech company. So then I'm off on my own.
You're out. You make money on that deal? Or
I made money on the deal.
You had stock in it?
Because when I sold Killion Extruders to Thermal Scientific, I sold it part cash and part stock. Okay. And the stock went up significantly during the 3-year period I was there.
And if they're buying it, it's going to go up
again. I was out looking for new things to do.
So you walk away, you got a pile of cash now, you have no businesses anymore. What happened to the laboratory business?
That all sold with
That was all part of the sale?
That was all part of the sale.
So you've now disgorged yourself of all the businesses you were running, and you're really an entrepreneur looking for something to do.
Yeah, plus I'm still in the horse business.
Right, you have the farm and the horses, right?
Yeah, and I'm still doing that.
Right, which you did for years until recently, right?
Yeah.
Several years ago.
Back then, I still had to be at the racetrack every morning, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
And then you go off to whatever you were doing at the time. You have a lot of energy, Jack.
Right, still do. Knock on wood.
Right.
I was looking around, again, using my networking skills. And I think if you're an entrepreneur, and one of the things I do now is I coach people how to network, including entrepreneurs. I recommend that you have at least 7 in-person meetings a week. Deliberate, targeted networking meetings a week. That'll probably take you 10 or 11 hours to do. And I think you have to devote that amount of time to creating new ideas, new alliances, new situations. So I started networking with people. And I ran across a very bright guy who I'd worked with at McKinsey, Victor Schnee, who owned a research company in the telecom space called Probe Research. Probe Research was doing work for major telecom companies like AT&T, the Bell companies.
Right.
And Victor, way ahead of his time, had an idea to start a new magazine for the corporate user to educate them about the new mobile and wireless communication technologies that were evolving.
So just starting then, right? The mobile phone was just coming on?
Just coming on.
Right.
We were probably 6 or 7 years ahead of our time. But he asked me if I wanted to team up with him to start the magazine for that sector. So I said, yeah, but Victor was a really tough guy. He's really a brilliant guy. One of the things I learned is I don't necessarily want to own a part of most small companies because most of them never really get bought out.
Right.
You're kidding yourself if you think you're going to monetize the equity. And I didn't want to be his employee. I didn't want to have that kind of role. So I proposed that I work full-time on launching a magazine, but as an independent paid consultant. So we negotiated a fee for me to do that. So I helped Victor launch wireless for the Corporate User magazine. And I was the only person in the very early stages working on the magazine. And again, I knew nothing about the industry.
No, but you knew the publishing.
I knew the publishing business, but I knew nothing about the telecom industry. So again, I had to create a whole new network among all these companies like AT&T and Verizon. And
learn the industry, to have the experts, to bring in the content, to get the advertisers, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
but it's really the same formula that you had used in many industries. That's why I think networking and what you do and your experience is really valuable to people, because it shows people that it doesn't matter what you do. The networking, the formula is the same, and it works if you are relentless, stay after people, and do the same thing over and over.
Right.
You're just repeating yourself.
Right. The biggest challenge I had in that business was just understanding the language of the business.
Right. It was more technical than the other stuff you had done.
And it's all acronyms. Like, it took me months to understand what an RBOC was. Okay. I kept asking, what's an RBOC? RBOC means Regional Bell Operating Company. It was the companies that spun off from AT&T.
It was an acronym for a baby bell, basically. Yeah. But you had been in the extrusion business. I'm sure you didn't know anything about polymers either, and you got to know that lingo.
No. So whatever business you're in, you really have to devote yourself to understanding the business.
Right.
So I essentially turned myself into an expert in that industry.
Right.
In the magazine, I stayed with Victor with the project for 4 or 5 years. And we were really early, but we turned that into a very successful venture. Again, multiple revenue streams. So one of the things, because the industry was...
Because most publications make their money from advertising, right? Okay, so what are the other revenue streams you developed?
There, because we're essentially helping to create a new industry, and the corporate user of these technologies didn't really understand them.
Right, and that's really who was using it in the early days, right? Yeah. Corporate guys.
Yeah. So I developed a program I called it Executive Briefings. So we start running half-day executive briefings around the country and eventually in other countries.
They're half-day seminars. Half-day seminars. And learn about the technology.
Right, where we would let the end user come for free. We would have these at a hotel or university. The end user would come for free, the attendees.
Right.
And we could pack a room because the information was really critically important. And we would fund that by selling sponsorships to companies to speak at the events.
They want to get in front of these people.
Right. So
And they had the money.
They had the money.
Right.
So we had no problem selling out executive briefings. And we would do typically 8 or 10 a year. And the best markets turned out to be Dallas, Chicago, and New York. The California markets were not good. Boston was good. We did a one-day full briefing specifically targeting the healthcare industry because these technologies were applicable for that.
So you're saying the user base that was developing was more Dallas, Chicago, New York, not so much on the West Coast.
Right. But we also tried Miami, Atlanta, Detroit.
Wasn't as successful?
No, but they made money. But the real home runs. We do one in New York. We get 700 people coming.
Wow.
We'd have to break it up and do 2 half-day programs.
Right.
And then we started publishing annual guides. So we would do an annual buyer's guide for wireless and mobile communications. And
like a consumer reports for the executives that reviewed this equipment?
Right.
Okay.
So the guides were aimed at the end user, the corporate buyer.
Right.
But all the content came from the suppliers. So they would run a page of advertising. Maybe we'd give them 2 pages of editorial content.
Right.
So we could do an annual guide and gross $350,000.
So it wasn't a review of this. You weren't testing the equipment.
No.
You were saying, okay, we have this forum. People come in and say, this is what we offer.
This is what we have.
People could read about it because it wasn't like the internet nowadays where you can search anything.
No.
You needed content.
Right. It was like the showcase of technology.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
So we had these annual guides. We had these briefings, and we started doing conferences. So I did a 2-day wireless and mobile communication conference in Amsterdam.
Okay.
For example, using European suppliers as the sponsors. So again, multiple revenue streams. I was seeing all these exciting young companies that were developing these new technologies. So I decided to take part of the editorial direction of the magazine in the direction of talking about these companies as investment vehicles.
For people to invest in telecom.
For people to invest in telecom.
Were they public companies, a lot of them?
Yeah, a lot of them were small public companies. Back then, it was the .com boom.
Right.
Things were
so
starting
for the average investor, you can buy stock.
Right.
Okay.
To kick off that part of the magazine, I organized an event at the Yale Club in New York. Again, networking.
Right.
I called all the major Wall Street houses.
Yale's over like a block and a half from Grand Central,
right,
isn't it? Right near the Cornell Club?
On Vanderbilt Avenue.
Okay, right.
So I called all the major Wall Street houses. I talked to them about who was their telecom analyst, and I put together a luncheon at the Yale Club with about 20 wireless and mobile communication analysts.
Analysts mean guys in the investment business that were analyzing these companies.
Right.
Okay.
So we put together like a 12-page section in the next issue of the magazine where we summarized the views of these analysts on what are the technologies that are going to emerge because there's competing technologies. What are some of the early stage companies that they like?
Right.
And that really started a whole different editorial trend.
I think regulatory compliance in those days was a little bit looser than it is now. It's probably a little bit easier to get that content.
So then we started doing investor conferences in the technology space. Along the way, I met a woman from one of the major Wall Street firms. I went out to dinner with her, told her what I was doing. And she said, why don't we start a hedge fund to invest in these companies?
Right.
I didn't even know what a hedge fund was.
Yeah, that was the early days of hedge funds.
So we talked for maybe 5 or 6 months, and we decided to start a hedge fund to invest in the technology sector, communication sector.
Right.
So we called that fund the Information and Communication Technology Fund. Meanwhile, I decided to get out of the publishing with wireless for the corporate user and to go into the hedge fund business.
So you sold out.
I had built up a management team which continued after I left.
Okay.
And eventually he sold the magazine.
Did you own part of that magazine or you were just an employee?
Just an employee. Just an independent fee paid consultant.
Okay.
I got a piece of the revenue stream plus a fee.
Right. Okay.
We started this Information and Communication Technology Fund. It's really sort of the only partnership that I've had that didn't work the right way. And I learned some lessons. Putting together a partnership is, you really have to be careful.
You really got to set the rules up right so you don't, because we got more partners get in trouble. They're not happy with the relationship. They can't change it. It's difficult.
I picked the wrong partner in this situation.
Right. Well, she kind of found you, didn't she?
She found me. I was the access to the content.
Right.
She was a very well-established advisor at a major firm with a high-level position. I quit Wireless for the Corporate User magazine to do this. Her husband was a doctor in New Jersey. He had an office behind his practice. So we set the fund up in this office behind her husband's medical practice.
Right.
And then she never quits her job on Wall Street.
Unbeknownst to you, or you knew that?
I didn't know that.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know that.
Right.
So by the time I quit my job to go into partnership with her, she's going to work on it like she was full-time.
Right.
But in name, she's not going to give up her job at the Wall Street firm and her clients at that firm. She puts her husband in as her surrogate partner with me. So now I'm partners with the husband doctor who has no interest or cares.
Right. Yeah, because she couldn't own it with you without disclosing it to her company in New York City.
Meanwhile, she had been running her business for the Wall Street firm out of the same office space.
Okay.
So from her firm's point of view, there was no apparent difference.
They didn't know anything.
Right. I should have walked away, but I didn't do that.
No, you got to be all in, right?
Yeah. She would work there, but, half the phone calls would be for her parent company.
Right.
And half the phone calls would be for our new company.
Right.
For our new fund.
Right.
We started just when the .com thing really took off. We started with capital from just, I think, 4 of us. I think we started with $600,000 from 4 investors, me, her, and 2 friends. By the second year, we were on the cover of Barron's magazine.
And did you bring in other investors?
Yeah.
Or just at that point you were...
She was great in a rising market. She knew how to leverage capital.
Right.
And she was brilliant. She's one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. And she was brilliant in a rising market. Our performance just took off like crazy.
Right.
I think in the second year, we're the second highest performing hedge fund in the country. Even though we were small. But we started to attract capital from other countries. Then the market turned. And it started to go down. It corrected. Right. And I kept trying to convince her
to go. Some .coms were blowing up and it was changing the business.
And one of the lessons I learned is that there are good money managers in rising markets and there are good money managers in declining markets.
It's a different skill, isn't it?
It's a different skill and different mindset.
Yeah.
Because in a rising
bulls
market...
Bulls and bears, kind of.
Yeah, bulls and bears.
Right.
She was great in a rising market.
Right.
Not good in a declining market.
A different way to make money in a declining market.
Right. So I kept trying to get us to go to cash until things calmed down. And she kept thinking every week was the bottom of the market, and she kept chasing it. So we wound up losing 80% of the money.
Right. After you were that big, right?
After we were that big. It was pretty discouraging. Our investors were discouraged. Some of them pulled out. Many of them didn't. So one of the things that surprised me is the resilience of investors.
Yeah.
They just won't change. So at the end of our third year, this wasn't working. And she wanted to totally change the mandate of the fund. She said, I was never a technology expert. I'm a more balanced portfolio manager. We got to roll the money into a new fund, different mandate. And I didn't want to do that.
Right.
I didn't see anything I could bring to that equation. So we contacted all the investors. Most of them rolled money over into a new fund that she created, and I left. And one of the guys that was working with us said to me, why don't we start a fund of hedge funds? He had been like a staff guy at the technology fund.
Right, that's where the Eagle Rock Fund
That's where, so the two of us started the Eagle Rock Diversified Fund to invest in a portfolio of hedge funds. I thought this guy was going to be a great partner. So I made a mistake with a woman as a partner. I thought this guy was going to be a great partner. He looked the part. He's like 6'2", good-looking, well-dressed, authoritative, had a good college education, naval officer, worked for a major retail company, had his own retail business for a while. On paper, he looked like the real deal. The first time I thought we were going to have a problem was when I met his wife. She was totally not up to speed with what we were doing.
She had no clue.
She had no clue. She had nothing she could really add to the equation. It was obvious she was going to be an anchor on him. He was not going to be able to spend the kind of crazy time I spend out meeting people, developing relationships.
Right. So it wasn't like he had another job, but in terms of like going to a night event or a morning breakfast, she'd be like, how come you're not home?
Right.
There's a supportive side of the relationship.
So for other entrepreneurs, when you're looking for a partner, when you're thinking about a partnership, I recommend you spend some time with a potential partner's spouse.
Right.
Male or female.
Right.
You'll learn a ton.
A lot of the dynamics.
You'll learn a ton doing that.
But the Eagle Rock Fund was successful.
Right. I just ended it in December.
Right.
So for 18 years, Eagle Rock Fund.
But he left early on, though.
He left after a couple of years.
Okay.
Because in the first couple of years, we were working pretty hard, trying to raise capital and find funds to invest in. And he just wasn't having the impact that he should have had. And I really liked the guy. So I said to him, there's some reason why you're not being successful. I have no idea what it is. And I even had people tell me, there's no sense you sending him out to meet with me because he doesn't like spending time with people.
Oh, well, you're not a people person.
But he appeared to be a people.
Appeared to be.
I had never realized that, so I suggested he go see somebody who could counsel him. So he wound up going to a doctor, psychological thing.
Oh, for therapy.
For therapy.
Okay.
One day he shows up in my house with boxes of stuff. I said, what are all the boxes? He says, it's all my files. He said, I can't work any longer. I said, what do you mean you can't work any longer? He said, my doctor says I'm under too much stress.
Not just for you, but just in general, he couldn't work.
In the meantime, his mother had passed away and left him some money.
Okay, so he has the money.
So he had a little cushion. He had cushion. So I said, you can't just walk away.
Right.
I said, everybody's under stress. Everybody has to work.
Life.
He said, my doctor really recommends that I not work. So I said, we can't just have you walk out. We got investors who put money in. I said, why don't I just continue to run the fund? You don't have to come in. You get straightened out. And when she says you're okay, come back in and we'll pick up again.
Right.
In the meantime, I'll run it.
Right. So it's been 18 years. He never came back.
Right. So we did that for a year.
Okay.
I paid him the same as I was getting paid.
Oh, okay.
I would meet with him once a month to sign checks.
Right.
Because we had co-signatures.
Okay.
I'd meet him in a diner, and I'd bring him up to date. And some of our investors would say, I never hear from Kirk. What's good? So I had to fudge what Kirk was doing. So after a year, I knew this wasn't going to work. So on one of our meetings at the diner, I took 2 one-page documents that I had drafted. And I said, Kirk, this is not going to work any longer. Here's 2 agreements. You can sign either one you want. One, you sign, you own the fund, you're running it, starting today.
And buy you out.
I'll walk away. The other one...
You had money in the fund, though,
I had money as an investor.
So an investor, but you wouldn't run the fund anymore.
Right. Okay. The other agreement is you get out of the fund, I'll continue to run the fund. And I've signed the both.
But no money changing hands.
No money changing hands.
You can either take it or you'll take it.
Right.
Okay.
I don't care which one you do.
Right, okay.
I said, but we got to resolve it today. He signed the one where he walked away.
Okay.
And
probably what you expected him to do, right?
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. I was hoping he was saying, let's not do either.
Right. I want to stay in this.
I'm ready to come back to work.
Right. That didn't happen.
But it didn't happen. And from my point of view, the bad thing that happened is several of the early stage investors were his relatives. So when he pulled out, they pulled out. So I continued to run the fund for 18 years of my own.
Right.
And I just stopped at the end of last year because I'm getting older, and some of our investors were getting older and having to reclaim their money. And I've also got some health issues, and I didn't feel comfortable going out raising new money from new investors when I've got...
Just don't have anybody really wants to take it over or run the fund or anything like that.
Yeah.
So what did you do? You disbanded the fund, sent checks back to everybody, and that's it?
At the end of 18, I sent checks back to everybody. In the meantime, I've been doing a couple of other things.
Yeah, so let's get into that. So we've been talking for like 2 hours. We'll probably go for another hour, but I want to get into all the stuff you're doing now.
I'm interested in education.
You've always been interested in education.
I've taught at 3 colleges, Rutgers, Montclair State, and Fairleigh Dickinson University.
You still teach there, don't you?
No, but I'm still involved.
Okay.
I still recruit for MIT. I run a networking group of graduates at the MIT Business School. In fact, we had one of our periodic dinner meetings last night.
So like an alumni group locally for Sloan School graduates.
Right.
Okay.
It's a very successful formula.
Okay.
MIT thinks it's about the most successful alumni program that they have going on. So we're talking about me helping them expand it worldwide. So for about the last 4 or 5 years, my wife also is an entrepreneur. And she had a magazine for professional corporate women in New Jersey. And she also has a foundation to empower women and younger women in the state. It's called the Garden State Women Education Foundation.
Yeah, wasn't it Garden State Women's Magazine?
The
magazine?
Yeah.
Right. Is it still around? Is it just a website now?
No, it's a website and events.
Okay.
With the emphasis on the foundation. Early on, the foundation was providing scholarship support for inner city high school girls going to 4-year New Jersey colleges. Again, multiple revenue streams. When Judy had the magazine, she would also do events, financial conferences for women, health conferences for women. I started doing half-day networking workshops for professional and corporate women. Okay. And we would charge them to come. I would be the freebie speaker for Judy. And we might get 50 to 75 women coming at a time. Lawyers, accountants, bankers, business owners. And I did a few of those, and I got a call one day from an accounting firm, Rothstein Cass, asking me if I could put together a program to teach their women professionals how to network and develop client relationships. So from doing these little workshops for Judy, I wound up doing 2 years' worth of coaching with Rothstein Cass.
Now, are they still around? They get acquired?
They were still around.
They acquired other firms?
No, they got acquired by KPMG.
Ah, okay.
Until they got acquired, I was doing $30,000 to $40,000 a year of coaching with Rothstein Cass, initially with the women, and eventually it morphed into both men and women because the men heard about the program and they wanted to come in. So that got me into having an interest in coaching people how to network and develop relationships as a way to do 4 things. Just impact their personal lives, because the better you get at this, the more opportunities you create personally. Impact your family, because the opportunities I've created for Judy and our son Jonathan through my networking are unbelievable.
Right.
Jonathan's only had 2 jobs out of college. He's been out 14 years. I networked him to both jobs. He's never looked for a job.
Right.
And he's doing great.
Yeah, jumping all over the place. He's had 2 jobs.
So personally, you benefit, your family benefits, the organization you're working with benefits, and your career benefits. I now am spending a fair amount of time coaching people on how to develop these skills. I've been running workshops for people, in-person workshops. For the largest group, I did 200 lawyers at Brooklyn Law School. I've been brought in by companies like Colgate-Palmolive, J.P. Morgan Chase, Signature Bank. I've coached at maybe 8 or 9 universities, RPI, Drew, Rutgers, Fordham. And
it's really not a skill that's taught. I mean, look, as a lawyer, and Harris Rothstein, real visionary in the accounting space, built a big firm. Most professionals do not know how to network. They go to their alumni events and they don't know what to do.
They have no idea.
Yeah, they have no idea to follow up and to call people and build networks and stay in touch. And all the stuff that we do on a regular basis.
So I've really turned myself modestly into a real networking expert. I've written a book on the topic. The book is called Network All the Time, Everywhere with Everybody. That's my philosophy, and it's on Amazon, both in print and Kindle.
That was your first publication.
My first
You're working on a second. Now, Network All the Time is also your website?
Yeah.
So networkallthetime.com if they want to learn about you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll put links in the show notes to the book,
that'd be great.
Website, and all that type of stuff.
That'd be great. One of the recent programs I've developed to coach people is using Zoom, which is like Skype.
Right. It's a video conferencing platform, right? Okay.
So I'm now completing my second program, and the program consists of 4 one-hour sessions once a week for 4 weeks in a row, where I bring in groups of people from different locations, or they could be from the same location, but the 2 groups I've run so far are from multiple states, multiple companies.
Right, but it's done remotely.
It's done
through
remotely.
The computer. Okay.
Where everybody jumps on the computer.
Right.
The current program is Fridays from noon to 1 o'clock.
So it's a 1-month program.
It's a 1-month program for an hour once a week. The first one I think I did on Tuesdays. This one I'm doing on Fridays.
And where do you find these people who want to coach you? Through your networking?
To get the thing going, I've got the word out to people I know. The first one I did was a freebie. So I had 12 people taking it as a freebie.
Test it out.
And let me debug it.
Okay.
I had a managing director from Merrill Lynch in Boston. I had a real estate agency owner in New Hampshire. I had an ex-McKinsey person from New York City. I had a couple women business owners from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I had the head of marketing for a national law firm. Okay. So I think I had 12 people. That was once a week for an hour, and it really went great. Nobody dropped out. At the end of the program, the marketing manager for the national law firm called me up and asked me if I could do a program for 10 or 12 or 13 of their associates in 4 different offices: New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and Washington.
Go there.
No, to do it on Zoom.
Okay.
So I said, sure. I said, only it's not going to be a freebie.
Right.
I said,
you already did the freebie.
In the first 6 months, I'm going to charge people $200 a person to go through the 4-part training program. I said, in the second half of the year, I'm going to charge $500 a person. So they can.
And it's a set curriculum.
That I put together.
Right. I understand. So you follow your curriculum. Maybe they have questions or
totally.
Whatever. But
it's very interactive.
Okay.
Because I'm switching between having the slides on the computers.
Right.
And bringing up their faces.
Okay.
And the most I can comfortably handle is 15 people, including me.
Because of the platform and the faces and the slides and back and forth. I understand.
Right. So I can coach 14 people at a time, either from one organization or from the same organization, either multiple locations at that organization or the same. In June, I'm going to do a 4-workshop program with this national law firm, coaching 14 of their younger associates in 4 of their offices. And I'm sure it's going to change lives. It's going to change careers.
Right. Now, is this something that you're doing for the general public? Like, if somebody goes to your website, networkallthetime.com, is there information on there where they can sign up for?
Not yet. But I'm going to
still
be putting
in the developmental stages.
I'm going to be putting.
Is there a way on your website to register for your mailing list or your newsletter?
Yes.
So if they register, then they'll receive information when this is rolling out. So if anybody's listening out there, you want to interact with Jack, get on his list early, and then as this starts to roll out, you'll be one of the first people to participate in all this stuff.
And the real benefit, and I'm getting great reviews. One of the things I've done in the networking space is I've developed what I call the NQ survey, which is a way to assess a person's networking and relationship development skill level.
Okay.
So I get people to take it before the program and after the 4th workshop. And the result of the first group that I did, it was like a 45% improvement in their abilities as a result of taking my... They now understand how important this is, how to do it randomly, how to do it by targeting, how to network at events, how to network in groups, how to network online with LinkedIn. Right. So I get into all aspects of this.
It's interesting and it's a little funny. It's like, to us, it's intuitive.
Right.
Because of course I would do that, but a lot of people, they don't get it. And I also think a lot of the online social stuff, people nowadays, especially teaching them, they don't realize that they can connect outside the meeting too. There's a new feature of LinkedIn where you can literally find the person standing next to you and link into them right there.
That's
and a lot of people don't even have business cards anymore. They just want to link in and you get connected and they find out about stuff.
One of my advices to everybody is always have your business cards with you.
Right.
There was a woman, graduate from the MIT Sloan School at the meeting last night. Really a brilliant woman.
No business
sitting
cards.
next to me. I gave her my card. I said, could you have your card? She said, I don't have a card.
Right.
I said, you got to have a card.
How
am I ever going to get back in touch with you?
Right. So if they don't have a card, you can go on LinkedIn right there and link into them. So at least you're connected that way. Right. Now, you also were getting into, you're working on a second book?
Yeah, but let me just, one other point about this group coaching program.
Good.
One of the reasons I did it is it now gives me the ability to coach worldwide.
Right. And not having to fly to Dubai or wherever you're going.
Or them flying in to see me.
Sure.
So I'm currently talking to a British company headquartered in London.
Okay.
I coached in person their New York staff last year. Now I'm talking about coaching their London staff remotely for $200 a person.
Right. Well, then it's inexpensive for them, and you don't have to fly you over and put you up in a hotel for a week.
Right.
Sure. So, or even that, it's every 4 weeks. They have to fly in 4 times.
Right. So the reason I have a week in between is because I suggest exercises that they practice in the weeks in between these sessions.
Homework.
So that, I don't call it homework.
No, but it is. But you got to do the work.
You got to, it's very interactive. I have doing an evaluation at the end of the program, and I'm getting absolutely great feedback.
Great.
Indispensable.
Well, sounds real promising.
What was your question?
You're working on a second book, you had told me.
I'm working on a second book. I'm about 80% done.
Okay.
The working title is Been There, Done That.
I think it's a great title.
Because I've been there and I've done that.
Right.
It's taking each part of my life and identifying the key lessons I learned that apply to businesses and entrepreneurs. Like, what did I learn in the horse racing business that applies to other business leaders? Could apply to Bill Gates as well as to an entrepreneur. What I learned in country music that every business leader needs to know is you have to have multiple revenue streams.
Right.
What I learned through Killion Extruders, one of the things I learned there is it's important to pick the right partner. I picked the right partner.
Right. Sometimes we don't. A lot of people don't.
Right.
I think so. If anybody signs up either for our mailing list at BindLaw.com or your mailing list network all the time, they will get a notice when the book's released, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's a good way to stay in the loop.
So I take each stage of my life. What did I learn at Yale? What did I learn at McKinsey? What did I learn in the Army? And one of the key lessons I learned in the horse racing industry that every entrepreneur and business leader, I think, should pay attention to is to trust your gut. Because in most businesses, if you make a decision and you sort of are queasy about it, you don't feel totally comfortable.
Right.
You can correct it somehow. Fire the wrong person or change the terms of the deal. In the horse racing business, if you make a judgment that you basically know could be not right, what you can wind up doing is killing the horse.
Right.
And at the racetrack, I had 3 horses get killed because basically I made a bad decision.
Really?
That's irreversible.
Right. Devastating. It's costly financially. It's costly emotionally, right?
Yeah. So I learned from that to do a better job of trusting my gut.
Right.
So if I sort of see a business opportunity, like I see a business opportunity in coaching people on networking, I'm going to pursue it because my gut tells me there's a need. Because I'm meeting so many people who don't have these skills.
Well, Jack, we've been doing this for about 2 hours. I think it's probably going to be a 2-part episode. But I want to thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and your wisdom and your thoughts about what businesses you wouldn't do, solely owned businesses, things about building revenue streams, networking. I encourage anybody listening to go to Jack's website, to get on his email list, to learn about what he's doing, to get the book, and maybe we'll buy a bunch of your copies and give some of them away when they come out of the new book.
That'd be great.
And we'll get this out to our mailing list. So thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it very much. We're friends, so we'll be having eggs and bacon together most months. And if anybody has any questions for Jack, what's your email? Jack@networkallthetime.com?
Yes.
Okay, and that'll also be in the show notes and the transcript.
If you like the podcast, please tell others about us. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, on Amazon Music, and many of the other podcast directories. If you like what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review and feel free to share our episodes on social media. If you have any questions or comments, ideas for the show, or you'd even like to appear as a guest, reach out to us by email at info@bindhackerlaw.com. The Accidental Entrepreneur is hosted and produced by me, Mitch Bindhacker. If you'd like more information about my legal services, you can find me on social media or visit my website at bindhackerlaw.com. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to our feed to be notified of all future episodes.